thank you, Zendaya. This is the Town of Hilton Head Island Accommodations Tax Advisory Committee regular meeting of Thursday, November 4, 2021. It is 9 a.m. and I'm calling the meeting to order. Zendaya, have we complied with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, sir, we have.
Okay. Committee members, please reply present when called upon. Make sure you unmute yourself. Zendaya, please call the roll.
Ms. Johnson?
Present.
Ms. Martin?
Present.
Mr. Farrell?
Present.
Mr. Berghausen?
Present.
Mr. Thomas?
You're muted, Richard. He's still on mute, but I see his face, so I know he's
I got it.
There you go.
Thank you, Jim. Present.
Mr. Arnold?
Present.
And Mr. Fluker?
Present. Okay, now to the approval of the agenda. Zendaya, does the staff have any changes to the agenda?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay. Do the committee members have any changes made to the agenda? You signify in some manner. I don't see anything coming up on the screen. So if none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
All right. Zendaya, please call the roll.
Ms. Johnson?
Approved.
Ms. Martin?
Approve.
Mr. Farrell?
Approved.
Mr. Berghausen?
Approve.
Mr. Thomas?
Approve.
Mr. Arnold?
Approved.
Mr. Fluker?
Approved. All right. We move to item 5 of the agenda, the approval of the minutes of the previous meetings. Committee members, has everybody had an opportunity to review the draft minutes that were part of the package? And does anybody have any changes to the minutes as were presented? I have one. It's a typographical error in the September 30th meeting on page 2, item 7C, the first full paragraph begins, Chairman Fluker expressed his dissent regarding the untimely filing of, and the next word in the minutes is and. A and D, that should be replaced. Take the D off, it should be and. It's the correction in the first line of that paragraph. Other than that, I have no other comments or changes to the minutes. So if we have no other changes, the chair would entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of the meetings.
So
I'll make that
moved.
motion, Mr. Chairman. So moved.
All right, thank you.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Zendaya, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Ms. Johnson?
Approved.
Ms. Martin? Oh, actually, Ms. Martin was absent for the 14th and the 21st, and I will make a note of that.
Yes, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Farrell?
Approved.
Mr. Berghausen?
Approve.
Mr. Thomas?
Approved.
Mr. Arnold?
Approved.
Mr. Fluker?
Approved. Well, even though Ms. Martin was not at the meetings, I know that she has heard the
I have
recordings.
reviewed them and I approve.
All right, thank you. All right, item number 6 of the agenda, appearance by citizens. Do we have any people presenting today, Zendaya?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, public comments concerning today's agenda items were to be submitted electronically via the town's open town hall portal. The public comment period closed yesterday at 4:30. At the conclusion of the open town hall, there were no comments. However, one citizen did sign up to speak before the committee today. Mr. Chairman, we currently have Mr. Hoagland holding.
Okay, all right, Mr. Hoagland. There you are. Go ahead.
Can
Mr.
you hear
Hoagland.
me?
Yes, I
Can you
can,
hear?
sir. Yes.
All right. Morning, Mr. Sent you an email investigation on your corruption and your conflicts last night. I just received my ATAX accounting from Town of Hilton Head sent by Bill Miles to me and South Carolina Turk. who also requested this full accounting on how and where millions of ATAX funds are spent by Bill Miles. This accounting and audit sent is incomplete, it's fraudulent, and is a hired internal audit, not an independent audit, and only shows the numbers that Bill Miles wants you and us all to see. His secret sauce on millions of ATAX funds continues. The recent DMO contract developed by lawyers Terry Finger and Curtis Coltrane is also corrupt, fraudulent, not valid, schemed to eliminate any accounting provisions, and assisted by town fraudsters, Councilman Lennox and Ames, as you all know. The entire ATAX committee, individually or their companies they work for, from our investigation, are all chamber members, sit on chamber boards, committees tied to Bill Miles, and keep approving illegal funding and usage by Bill Miles and other nonprofits like the Low Country Golf Owners Association and the Boys and Girls Club. It's not about worthy, it's about legal. You are all in severe conflict committing fraud and never seen the accounting on how Bill Miles does laundering of millions to pay his $500,000 to $600,000 salary pay package, world travel to China, $2 million home in Indigo Run, $500,000 cashier's mountain home, and much more. You are also allowing, by recommending this funding, violations to many state and federal laws by Bill Miles and this illegally operated chamber DMO ATAX funded tax scam and tax fraud. You are all liable for scheming and knowingly recommending this illegal use of millions of tax money and violating your fiduciary duties as ATAX members. I again sent a long email to all of you copying state authorities, some BC'd, and law enforcement on your lies, corruption, and severe conflicts tied to this chamber. I am sure you will all be contacted to tell your side of the story. Be forewarned, lying and perjury to state officials is a crime, and all your emails can also be subpoenaed. Several questions you will need to answer to authorities. Who called you to ask you to serve on this committee? Under what criteria did you recommend ATAX funding to Bill Miles and even other nonprofits? Have you ever seen Bill Miles accounting or any full accounting of any nonprofit that you approve or recommend funding for? Why do you recommend funding if you know it's not legally used and issued? Why do you recommend funding of nonprofits that don't qualify under ATAX laws? Mr. Fluker, you're a lawyer and you know better, and you're going to be held fully accountable as chairman, and you're going to have to answer these questions, and I hope you're prepared. If you disagree that everything I just said is legal, explain what makes it, or if everything I said is not illegal, explain what makes all this legal and right. Mr. Fluger, am I clear to you this morning, and am I clear to all of this ATAX council on where this is headed? Does everybody understand what's going on? Mr. Fluker, did you hear everything I said?
I'm hearing you.
Okay, all right. Now you better, as a lawyer, you better do something about it, or you're going to be in big trouble. And this is not going to be a good way for you to end your career. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. Mr. Hoagland referenced in his discussion this morning an email that he sent. He sent it to over 50 individuals or agencies or entities. It was addressed to members of the ATAX committee as well, but I'm not sure in his getting it to everybody that he put their proper email address or a current email address. So what I'm going to do is ask that email that I received, and I know that members of the town staff have received, so they have it in front of them, that email be attached to the minutes of this meeting with the email addresses on it redacted, so that it becomes a part of the record of this meeting, so that the members who did not have an opportunity to see it and the public at large will have an opportunity to see what Mr. Hoagland has published. So I'm going to ask right now to members of the committee, do I hear any objection to the attachment of that email as a record at the to these minutes.
No.
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 No objection.
I have a question
Yes, sir.
related to procedure, I guess, for future meetings. Is it possible or permissible for a member of the committee to recuse themselves from Mr. Hoagland's comments?
That would be something that would have to be taken up with, I guess, with staff attorneys to figure that out, since we are.
Okay,
I mean, you can, I guess you can walk out of the room while he's speaking.
Okay.
I know that I've seen that the council has done that in the past when he's spoken, that members of the council have walked out. But since we're all sitting in our private residences or businesses right now, conducting our business, I mean, you have the right to listen or not listen to his comments. I consider them to be libelous and slanderous. But he believes he has the First Amendment right. And again, if he believes he has the First Amendment right to say these things, I, as a lawyer, believe in the First Amendment. And so he has the right to say these, even though they are hurtful. And I believe that they are untrue. I mean, I know them to be untrue with the people that I serve with. These 6 individuals I know to be honorable people, and so I say that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm here to defend our actions in that regard. I don't think it is necessary to defend our actions because we have done nothing wrong. So I want to leave it at that. I don't want to say too much on the record about this, but I believe what he says is basically libelous and slanderous and is untrue. And that's the chairman's comments on that. So if there's no objection, I'm going to ask that staff attach the redacted email, and the redaction being only the emails to which that email was sent to.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
prior
yes, sir.
to proceeding, I do have a question about eligibility for the public speaking portion. Is there a requirement for, what is the eligibility requirement? Is it for a town of Hilton Head residents?
That's been my question too, because I know that Mr. Hoag, I believe, I don't want to say I know, because I don't know for a fact, but I believe that based on the information I have, that he is not a citizen of Hilton Head Island. He does not own property within Hilton Head Island. Now, I don't know if he has a business tie to the island or not. This has been a question I know has come up at council meetings as to his ability or standing to comment at meetings. That's another thing I'd like to run by staff. And I think before we get into next year's programs and such, I will talk to staff attorneys and staff about that and see where what the procedure is, because I guess we would follow whatever the town follows. And I need to know what their criteria are for that.
Yeah, I'm not referring to just Mr. Hoagland, just anybody.
I know.
What constitutes eligibility for that?
Right. I mean, and it's, I know it's supposed to be citizen comments, and the question is, who is a citizen?
Correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Farrell.
Thank you.
Any other discussion about the public speaking area of the meeting before we move on to next business? Okay. Item 7, unfinished business. There appears to be no unfinished business to come before the committee. So item 8 is new business, which is the review and recommendation for the 2022 accommodation tax grants. Is Mr. Troyer on right now? There you are, John.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Troyer.
Yes, normally, Mr. Chairman, at this time, we will be able to present our projections for financial availability of grants to be considered for the committee. We've had conversations with our friends at the state. The state is behind this year. We normally would have 3/4 of actual numbers, and we would project 1/4. And we would have pretty good comfort in our, we'd be very conservative in our 4th quarter projections, so that the committee would be comfortable in knowing that these numbers would be available to be granted. However, this year the state is behind. They have communicated to us that it's going to be another couple of weeks or so before they're able to do this. They have given us an early indication of our third quarter collections. Part of their process on this third quarter collections or through September 30th, what they normally remit to us by the end of October, they, as a practice, withhold an amount to be determined and remitted back to the municipalities and counties later in the year. And so we don't know what that withholding amount is, but from the indications, it seems like that our the committee does have the ability to grant these requests as they are fit within the ATAX guidelines. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, is my report.
All right, Mr. Troyer. So it's my belief, at least from talking to staff and from the presentation here today, that we believe we will have sufficient funds to fully fund the requests that have been made here today. So our job as a committee then is to go through these applicants and these applications and make sure that they qualify under the guideline, under our guidelines, the Turk guidelines and such, and are worthy candidates for funding to promote tourism on the island. So at this point, what I'm going to ask is that we not, in the past when we've done this live and in person, we've always had on the two big screens the spreadsheet with the running total of where we're at and what we're doing and such. And I don't think that's going to be necessary at this point to do that. So the chair would like to go do what we call our first run through the spreadsheet and through the applicants without posting that running total on the screen. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think we need to judge each and every applicant on their own merit, not what money is available or not available, even though we know that there will be sufficient funds probably to fund every one of the requests, but we need to judge each and every one of these applicants on their own merits, regardless of the funding available. And I'd like to do that also so that in my mode here, as I'm looking at gallery mode on my computer, I have the ability to visualize the members of the committee so that you can wave at me, jump up and down, whatever, to get my attention so that I can call on you. Because what I do, my practice in the past, in the last two meetings, has been to do a round robin type deal where I just take the members of the committee and rotate through them, and we change who the head person asking questions each time was, just to make it fair. But at this point is I'm just going to ask members of the committee to signal with their hand or otherwise to be recognized. The chair will recognize you and make whatever comments you deem necessary on each and every application, because it's not necessary that every member speak it every time. We've learned from Justice Thomas that silence sometimes is golden on the Supreme Court. So we will, if you don't have anything to add, we'll move on. But prior to starting the first round, and I'm going to ask the members to unmute themselves at this point, the chair would entertain a motion from the committee to defer consideration of one of the applicants, at least until we have fully and completely gone through the first 33 applicants. And that would be to defer any type of action on the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra. And the reason for that being is they filed an untimely application. And I would like to give the 33 timely applicants an opportunity to, for their full and fair consideration before we take up the symphony orchestra. So the chair at this time would entertain a motion from the members to that extent.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we review all the timely applicants first before we review the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
A second.
All right. Cindy, would you call the roll on that?
Certainly. Ms.
Yes.
Johnson,
Approved.
Ms. Martin,
Approve.
Mr. Farrell,
Approved.
Mr. Berghausen,
Approve.
Mr. Thomas,
Approved.
Mr. Arnold,
Approved.
and Mr. Fluker.
Approved. All right, let's go down, and we've all received basically a spreadsheet that has the applicants in alphabetical order. That's the order in which they'll be taken up today. And so this time, the first applicant up for consideration is 12 Jewels of Life. Does anybody have any comments or recommendation on 12 Jewels of Life? Ms. Martin.
I have a comment after listening to well, I can't really call it a presentation. I should call it a discussion that they called in. They're loosey-goosey. I mean, they don't have a lot of substance. Actually, they don't have any substance. And I did notice the follow-up email that was sent to Zendaya as far as, who the restaurants that we're talking to or the chefs and all that. And that's still not very substantial. Talking to a restaurant versus engaging and having a commitment is very different. So I don't feel comfortable about this one at this point. However, and this is something Margaret and I were talking about, when we don't, and this goes blanket approach for everybody else, if we don't approve some funds, I'm hoping that we can give critical, constructive feedback back to the organizations on how to either, one, they'll never get the funds based on their presentations, or two is how could they go out into the community to seek what they need without ATAX funds? But I don't approve this one.
Mr. Berghausen.
Jim, can I just share the overarching way I've looked at this? We had some discussion. When I go through my analysis, I found that I put each applicant in one of four categories. And the first category is that they're a strong applicant. They've demonstrated success, a good accountability and efficiency with our money, and that their request should be granted subject to the Turk guidelines. And the good news is, in my analysis, most of our applicants fall into that category. However, second category for me is, it indicates there's an efficiency concern. That is, good organization may be strong, it's just the amount of the request doesn't seem to be aligned with the amount of tourists they generate. The third bucket for me is that there's an accountability concern, where the applicant is not presenting measurable results in goals, and we don't see the evidence of heads in beds in the island. And actually, I have four, in my analysis, 4 applicants that fall in that bucket. There's 3 that fall into the bucket with efficiency concerns. And then the fourth and final category for me is that there's a capability or resource concern. I have 1 in that category, and that would be the 12 Jewels of Life. I think that the applicant lacks a history of demonstrated success or resources that would be required to do the proposed work prior to reimbursement. That's how I've approached each one, and you'll hear me use these categories in future comments.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas.
I would like to agree with the foregoing comments that have been made. And I'd also like to say that this seems to be a good concept. So at the concept stage, this is a worthy concept. And I think this would fit exactly what Julie was talking about earlier in terms of being able to provide specific constructive feedback as to how they might go about providing the kind of evidence that we might need to feel more comfortable risking an investment in helping them get going. But at this time, I would have to say that I agree that I would not recommend an award for 12 Jewels of Life.
Yes, Ms. Johnson.
Good morning. I really struggle with this one because, like the previous speakers, I do agree that the presentation was lacking what we need to make a decision. However, I believe the idea, the concept is great and is doable. I believe that if there's any way for us to give them recommendation and constructive advice, perhaps going to other agencies in the area, such as SCORE, that might assist them in creating a viable grant presentation. It's the presentation of the idea that just wasn't there, although the concept itself is certainly worthy, and I see how it could be a tourist draw. I don't know whether it's ever appropriate to use these funds for startup assistance or assisting them in creating a grant. I don't see my reading of the Turk guidelines that that's appropriate. So based on that, I'm unable to support that, but do strongly support giving constructive advice as to how they could turn this idea into an ATAX eligible event. Thank you.
Any other comments from any other members at this time? I'll give you a chance. Yeah, one of the things, and we've had applicants who did not receive funding in one grant cycle turn around the next grant cycle and receive funding because they learned from our comments right here today what the problem was. And part of that is fitting into the category, first of all, making appropriate category requests, presenting a good sound budget for those requests so that the Turk funding can be determined from your budget. And the other is having the financial resources, because this is reimbursable fund. So that's the first thing, is you've got to have some capital or something to start with to be able to fund your project. So to that regard is I am also not favoring this applicant. Are there any other comments at this time? I don't see. Well, Mr. Arnold.
No, I have
just
none. I'm trying to get this thing adjusted. I'm in full agreement. I just feel like this applicant has put the cart before the horse in a lot of ways. They're just not ready to be funded by ATAX. So
I think if they, if I could lend them some, they're going to have to put on at least one of these programs. They're going to have to find a way to foot the bill to do it at least one time. Maybe not be as ambitious as they were in their previous applications or in this application about having multiple programs. I think maybe they need to start with a smaller single program and see if they can do it one time, and then they can show that they have that ability and come to us, and then over time they might be able to build it into something that each year, I mean, we see sometimes some of our grant recipients start small and get bigger, and their grants either get enlarged or get smaller because the revenues they receive from their programs are so successful that they need less funding from us in the future. So that would be my advice to them if they are listening today or watching today, is perhaps you need to take a little baby step here and maybe see if you can't get one of these on. I know that I saw something in the packet about their hot dog stand or whatever was at a location. Well, that's a fundraiser. Hopefully they made some money on that, and hopefully they can move forward with getting some capital so that they can put one of these programs on, and then be able to demonstrate some numbers to us based on that budget, and then come to us with a budget that they can work with. But again, the financials that we had were they're not current. They weren't real favorable to being able to get reimbursed $20,000 for a grant based on their current financials as they were presented to us. So those are my comments at this time. Ms. Martin, did you have something further?
Yeah, and I think there's opportunities within this community between, USCB and even some of the larger, restaurant groups on the island that are always eager to promote young chefs and to grow their businesses that way, that they just need that connection to, like you said, Jim, get one going so they can have a track record. They need to start somewhere. And I don't think it would take a lot. I just think it would take the right connections.
All right. I see anything further? Because at this point, what I'm hearing from the committee members is that there's no recommendation at this time, that the recommendation would be 0. So based on what I'm hearing, I'm going to ask that staff put a 0 on the 12 Jewels of Life at this time. The next applicant is the Art League of Hilton Head. Does anybody have any recommendations or comments to start off with? Jim, you're muted if you're saying. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll speak up, and I have this one fully funded. I think they made a strong case. They need to watch their tourist number to make sure that we don't get the creep in the wrong direction on the cost per tourist. But I think they made a nice pitch and have a strong track record.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to make comments or otherwise? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, I'll just follow Jim's comment in the sense that I thought they in their presentation, both of their application and their presentation, they made a very good case for the increase in the amount of the grant request, and I would recommend fully funding it.
Okay. Mr. Hartle, I saw you were going to pop in there.
Just my recommendation to fully fund this applicant.
Okay. Do we hear any objection to a fully funded on this applicant of $95,000? So I'll look to see. I don't see anything, so I'm going to ask staff to put $95,000 in the spot for the Art League of Hilton Head on the first run. All right, the next applicant is the Art Center of Coastal Carolina. The request is $405,000. Do I have any comments or recommendations?
I have them as fully funded.
Any objection to fully funding the Arts Council at this time, or the Arts Center, I'm sorry.
Fully funding for me.
All right, so
Full
I
funding,
see.
no objection.
All right,
No objection.
all right, so at this point, yeah, on first run, staff, please put $405,000 into the Arts Center. The next applicant is the David Carmine's Memorial Fund. Their request is $19,600. Oh, yes, Mr. Thomas.
I mean, if there is a no-brainer on this list, this would be my candidate for that organization. I mean, it almost begs the question that, should we recommend over awarding? And I'm being a little facetious in saying that, but I certainly would recommend full funding.
I would agree with that. I especially applaud the fact that they've shown great responsibility in the amount that they've requested and demonstrated how they've used it in the past. So I support it.
And
Fully fund from my end, please.
Me
Fully
too.
fund.
I
Okay, do I-
concur.
All right, so I see no objection to fully funding, and as I look at it from chairman, their previous grants have been over $100,000. And when I look at that, they also, during their presentation, let us know that over the last 15 years, they've presented over $1 million in charitable donations during that time. So I think that this is a worthy candidate. So we will, that's the chair's position as a member. So let the record show, and staff, please put into the spreadsheet that full funding of $19,600 to the Carmine's Memorial Fund.
Jim, you may have to have a fifth category in your buckets to have a no-brainer category.
Okay, I'll
The
take
next
that.
The next one is the Golem Museum of Hilton Head. First, before we start, I have a question of staff. So Zendaya, maybe you can answer this. When I went through this, Turk, are they only qualified? Are they fully qualified under the Turk guidelines?
Yes, sir, they are. However, they did have a program in there for summer camp that is not eligible. It doesn't serve tourists that we saw, but it could be eligible. We just need to look into that part further. But overall, they are fully fundable, able to be fundable for categories 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, because that's the question. As I was looking at the spreadsheet, it appeared to me that under category 1, there was a deficiency of about $1,700 or so of funding eligibility, but that is not, is that correct or not correct on category 1 on the spreadsheet that we have? I see the maximum amount reimbursable is 92 and their amount requested on that was 93,750.
Yes, that is correct. However, they do have the other 2 categories that could, cover the shortfall for that category.
Okay.
So it is possible.
So they're okay. So they are eligible if the committee sees fit to fully fund their request. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. With that, does anybody have any recommendations or comments? Mr. Thomas.
With the original Salazar studies 5 years ago or so, the Golem Museum was identified as, I believe, the 5th most powerful attraction for tourists that we have on the island. And, looking at what they've done with the grant from last year, the improvement in the facility, the quality of the presentation, the predictability of the scheduling, all of those things. I mean, I think they've made wonderful use of the funds that were awarded. So I'd be in favor of fully funding.
Any other comments? Yes, Ms. Johnson first.
I would also support fully funding within the Turk guidelines, and just want to mention that I did attend the food festival, which was enormously well attended, and I look forward to seeing what statistics they get from that in terms of who was there. But it was certainly a very well attended and well put on event.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bergerhausen.
Yeah, I concur with what Rich said. I mean, cost per tourist isn't the be all end all here. They're within a reasonable range and doing all the right things, did great things with the award last year. So I'm in favor of fully funding.
Is there
No
anybody?
objection from.
That's what I'm saying. Does anybody disagree with fully funding this applicant?
No.
Okay, seeing none, the chair would ask staff please to place $125,000 in the column for the Golem Museum of Hilton Head Island. The next applicant is the Harbortown Merchants Association of Harbortown 4th of July. Now, when I looked at this again I'll ask staff about this. When I looked at the spreadsheets we were given for Turk breakdowns, the question I had again is categories, and they had no category 1 in their budget. So does that, where are we on the ability to, I know we can fully fund, but what does that do with our Turk guidelines, Zendaya? Are we able to grant them what they're asking for?
Yes, we still are able to grant them for what they asked for. With this one, typically they have reimbursements for category 2 and category 4, as those typically are their heavier spent areas. So if they do submit something for category 1, we would, at least speak to them about it and go from there. But I do see that they still can receive full funding.
Okay, yes, I see that they're entitled to more funding well, especially in category 2 than they've asked for, according to their budget. And slightly, they're entitled to more under category 4 than what they budgeted. So, so they are eligible for full funding based on TURC guidelines. All right, does
Right.
anybody from the committee have any recommendations or comments?
I recommend full funding for this applicant.
All right, Mr. Arnold. Any other further comments? Or is there anybody that objects to full funding of the Harbortown Merchants Association?
I
All right.
approve as well. I recommend as well.
All
I
right,
agree.
seeing none. Okay, seeing none at this time, the chair would ask staff please to place the sum of $23,000 in the column for the Harbortown Merchants Association. The next applicant is the Hilton Head Choral Society. Their grant request is $50,000. And I see that under TURC guidelines, they're fully qualified for the $50,000. So is there anybody who has any comments or recommendations regarding this applicant? Yes, Mr. Bergen.
I'll say that this is one of 3 that I put in the efficiency concern bucket. It's not about whether this is a good organization or bad organization. I'm all in favor, but these are tourism dollars, and their history of producing tourists or showing that tourists come make this a very inefficient use of our dollars. And so I don't think the grant request is really right-sized with their proven results of attracting tourists. That's where I struggle, but I wouldn't recommend taking them to 0, but I would cut this one back just to send a little message and give them an opportunity to come back next year and show a lot of growth in tourism or count better or whatever it takes.
Do you have a recommendation? Because I'm just going to say this, in past years, what I would say when we were doing fully funded matters pre-COVID outside of pandemics,
Yeah.
their 2019 and 2020 grants were $40,000. So would a figure of, in this case, 40,000, would you think $40,000 would send them a message, or what's the?
Well, I would suggest 25,000. I would suggest a 50% award, and please come back next year.
I was going to say the exact same thing, 25,000, and I like Jim's thoughts about sending the message, but also they're more of a local organization, and they need to show us to show how they are using ATAX dollars to bring tourists. And I don't think they have that as much. So I think 50% of their ask would be good. And in 2019, I'm showing they got 19,000. So I think they could, if we send the message that work with 25 and come back with some results, I think that's a good message. It's still positive. It's still some.
Yes.
And just to build on the previous comments, just to send at least a little advice relative to what it would take to move in the direction of giving evidence of the attraction of tourism. Even to see how a marketing plan might reflect a different approach to marketing than they have used in the past, that is more directed at tourist eyes than local eyes. And I think that might be helpful in moving in that direction.
They even mentioned potentially the person buying the ticket is buying 6 tickets for tourists. And so maybe they've got a better story to tell already, but it's not up to us to project that. It's up to them to count it and bring it to us. But there may be good potential already there.
Yes, Ms. Johnson.
I agree with the comments and recommendation at 50% or approximately 50% of the ask.
Does anybody, okay, at this point, I'll ask, are there any objections to a 50% recommendation at this point? Okay, seeing none, then the chair would ask staff to please place the sum of $25,000 in the column for the Hilton Head Choral Society. The next one up is the Hilton Head Concours d'Elegance. Their ask is $307,000. Are there any recommendations or comments regarding this application? Go ahead, Jim.
I'll go. I try not to go first all the time, but I have this as fully fund. I mean, it's a great program. They've got a lot of documentation about the tourists they attract. I'll not go on, but fully fund.
Is there any-
I agree. And actually, when I'm listening to their presentation, it seems that they're very avant-garde for this coming in 2022, as far as some of the new things that they're doing. Granted, it's going to be a big year for them, but I totally agree with the work that they do. And I, just as a side note, you know, working at Marriott Vacation Club, I have seen this year, and I don't know if it's because of COVID, I think it is, working in marketing, that we're having new people come to the island that we didn't see before. You know, we have, you know, usually the habitual owners that come, but now we're having guests and new owners that are coming to discovering Hilton Head, and they're coming back for a lot of different reasons that all of these organizations are doing. And one of them is Concours d'Elegance, and we happen to have a big presence there for our guests. But I think what they're doing is pretty exceptional. I agree to fully fund.
Is there anybody that disagrees with fully funding? If you do,
No, Mr. Chairman, at first glance, I was spooked by the significant amount compared to previous years, but after hearing their presentation, I agree with fully funding. It's a very comprehensive plan.
hearing no objection to fully funding the Hilton Head Concours d'Elegance, then would staff please place the figure of $307,000 in the column for that applicant? The next applicant is the Hilton Head Dance Theater. Their request is $19,000. Any comments, questions? I see you smiling. I know this is one of those category ones for you. I know, but it's, but again, yeah. Anybody have any, if you want to start, Jim, that's fine. That's
I'll take the pressure off for him. This is a high ticket price.
Start the
Mr. Arnold,
bucket.
you go ahead, Mr.
So it
Arnold.
helps with the buckets, I think. So Jim, you go
Yeah.
ahead.
I would just agree with, it is a high ticket. It's a high ask for the return, but they are a steady and dependable event for us. That is a time-honored tradition. So I would recommend full funding on this one. They serve a great purpose and fill a need for us here on the island.
And I'll speak up and say, yes, this is number 2 of my 3 efficiency concerns. I appreciate their candor with only 4 tourists last year, but even if you look back before that, 206 tourists the year before, I think the number is still really high. And so I would look at this personally as I did the Choral Society, and I'd probably go with a 50% award.
Okay, so we have 50% award, and we have a full funding request. We have 2 requests, or at least 2 comments on the board right now.
Here are my thoughts as well. And again, I like Jim's filters. I'm not disputing his filters at all, because I think it helps all of us really do the recommendations. If we're going to send a message to another organization as far as, hey, come back with more data and more how you're spending the money wisely, and we're cutting them at 50%, my opinion as a committee member, I think we should be consistent. So I think as well, we should cut their funding to 50% with the feedback of coming back with more data to support them full funded next year into 2023. That's how I feel about it. I like to apply the filter of consistency, and I think, we should maintain that.
Well, Chair will chime in. One thing the Chair has tried to be is consistent and fair. That's the reason why we're only taking up 33 of the applicants at first. We'll take up that 34th. Now we know that funding is available. We may have these same comments for that organization when that happens. But I do want to treat each of them fairly. So the Chair's position is if we're going to send messages to organizations, then we probably should do it across the board. Even though it might, again, the philosophy is, even though we're making a recommendation, the town council eventually has to decide the funding. Their constituents, I'm sure, as they have in the past, if they are upset with our recommendation, will go to the town council. The town council may adjust our recommendation. And because there will be sufficient funds for them to do that, they could change our recommendation. But I think, as we've said, to be educational, to help these people in the process, so that these applicants that either are not getting funded or are not getting fully funded, they understand, here's what we're looking at. And here's what you need to try to if you have the numbers but can't present, you don't tally them, you need to find a way to get them tallied. If you're not getting those numbers from off the island, then you need to find a way to draw them in order to get tax funding, because that's what it's about. It is to draw tourism to the island. So in order to maintain fairness, the Chair hears that there's a recommendation for, at this point, $9,500. Is there any objection to the $9,500 funding?
No objection.
Mr. Thomas?
I'm not raising my hand as an objection to the recommendation, but I think it's important to recall that I think this organization is one of those that reflects on the character of the island and provides holiday attraction material for people who come to Hilton Head. Very high quality representation of what the island is about and what it stands for. And I would hate to see them have trouble bringing that offering to our visitors and to our residents because of the grant. But I understand the principle behind what we're doing, and I support that principle. So I don't object to the recommendation.
Yes.
I'm okay. I'll go. I still recommend full funding on this one. I don't mind on the first pass to cut it in half, but their request has been consistent through the years. I'm not one to sit on a throne and tell someone that we're going to set a tone with them. That's not my job on this committee. They are eligible for the full funding. We have the sufficient funds. I see no reason not to. We can encourage them. They're back in person. They do bring extremely good talent and put on good productions for not only tourism that comes, but during the holiday season for our local residents as well. And I think we should be mindful of that. To move forward on the first pass, I'm okay with the awarding 50% of that. But I think it's a slippery slope to start looking at all these candidates and say, well, we need to set a tone and have an iron fist. That, in my opinion, that's not our job. We need to take each one piece by piece, but I'm okay with 50% on the first pass.
Ms. Johnson?
Oh, I just wanted to say that prior to this morning's discussion, I was inclined to not approve this request, but based on what we've talked about here, I would agree with at least 50% reduction grant because of the number of tourists that they've shown historically, which is very, very low.
And again, I hope that our discussion here, and I hope that the applicants are watching this live or have access to that. And maybe it's just our discussion here today, and maybe in pass 2, or if we have to go all the way to pass 3, maybe we get them fully funded. I can't tell you that right now, but I think the discussion that we're having here today is healthy for all these organizations, whether they're fully funded or not. We're not funded at all. This is where they're going to learn or be educated. We're not here to punish them. We're here to make this a positive experience, even though it might very well be hurtful in the short term. The long term is that, again, our function is to promote tourism with these funds. They come from tourists. They're meant to go back into promoting tourism on the island. I have no doubt that every one of these applicants, all 34 of them, provide a valuable service to this island. I mean, this island is great with volunteers and organizations and events, and they all are Hilton Head strong. But the idea is we have to look at what our funding is meant to do, and that's to promote this island to people outside of 50 miles. And so whether this organization does that or not, it's really going to be up to them in the future. I would have fully funded them because of history. But again, I am one member on this committee. And so right now I'm hearing the committee say, at least on the first pass, let's go to 50%. Mr. Farrell.
My only point is that I would have put it in my no-brainer, and I hate to, I don't mean to be a contrarian. I just believe in what they do. I've seen what they do. I see the efficiencies with their spend on how they do it cost effectively with their, and I think it's something that a tourist shouldn't miss. I almost felt lucky to be in the room when I'm at one of their functions, and I see that it being a great opportunity for our tourists to have a great feeling about and a reason to come back to Hilton Head. I think it's that great. And I think the size of the ask is somewhat relevant too. But again, I'm one vote, and it's not a bone of contention. I would be more inclined to vote for fully fund.
Okay. At this point, though, the consensus I'm getting and disagree is that at least on the first pass, that we will put down in that column $9,500 as the recommendation of this committee. And again, I would recommend as we go through the second or future passes, please make your arguments again, because I'm sure that our members can be swayed. As a trial attorney, I've seen juries get swayed in the arguments in the jury room. That's at least what I've heard. So never having been there. Mr. Thomas.
As someone who's relatively ignorant to the rules of order in these proceedings, I would just want to ask, would it be appropriate to poll the members of the committee on full fund versus 50%?
No, that's fine. So what I would do at this point, I'm not going to ask Zendaya to get on because I've got you all on my thing here. So I'm just going to go down in order. Mr. Arnold, what is your opinion?
My opinion is full fund.
Okay. Ms. Johnson.
Funding at 50%.
Okay. Ms. Martin.
50% first pass.
Berghausen.
50%.
Mr. Farrell.
Fully fund.
Mr. Thomas.
Fully fund.
Well, the chair would, his recommendation would be fully fund. So right now, I think we're 4-3.
That's more.
So
that's
at this,
fully fund.
so at this point, let's put full funding. Again, that's Mr. Tom said is correct. I'm sitting here, you know, chamber can either have a voice vote, whoever yells the loudest wins, or we can have a poll. And in this case, the poll is correct. So that's what we will do. If anybody wants to call a poll, feel free at any time to do it. I mean, that's the right of the committee to poll the members. So with that, again, it's full funding recommended on first round for the dance theater. The next applicant is the Hilton Head Airport. Their ask is $160,000. It looks like from Turk, they're fully qualified under Turk. The recommendations or comments? Yes, Mr. Arnold.
Mr. Chairman, this is on the top of my list of a no-brainer for me. This is a full recommendation for full funding for the Hilton Head Island Airport.
I agree.
I agree.
All right.
No-brainer.
Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, that's fine. All right. Voice vote says that the full funding of $160,000 be placed in a column for the Hilton Head Airport. The next.
A thumbs up from James Berghausen should go on the record.
Well, it's on video, so everybody will see it from now on. So, the next applicant is the Hilton Head Island Land Trust. They've made an application or request for $41,000. Any recommendations or comments?
Full funding.
Okay. Mr.
Yeah,
Burgess,
I'll agree with, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
I was just going to say, I'll agree with what Jim said in the full funding side. Again, this is an organization that, has a number of properties on the island. One of them is Fort Howell, and the fact that Fort Howell is an affiliated site to Mitchellville Freedom Park as far as the network of sites for the Reconstruction Era National Park. This is an asset that's well worth our support. Plus, what has been done recently with the property and the way they are working to attract additional tourists through partnerships locally, just kind of, to me, underscores the value of this. So I would support full funding.
Ms. Johnson. then Ms.
I
Martin.
also support full funding and just want to say that this is one of the organizations that is speaking to historical tourism, a new term I've learned during these proceedings. And certainly I think today's vacationer or traveler is looking for places and events that have meaning, that they can enjoy themselves and also be enriched while being here. So I certainly support this at full funding.
Okay, Ms. Martin, you were next.
I totally agree with what Ms. Johnson just said. I actually learned a lot listening to their presentation about Fort Mitchell and all the work that they've done this past year. So that is definitely full funding for me.
Okay, is there anybody objects to full funding? I will look out to see if I see anybody. Okay, I see nobody objecting. So therefore, staff, would you please place the figure of $41,000 in the column for the Hilton Head Island Land Trust? Is there any member of the committee at this point? We've now been going for a little over an hour. Does anybody want to take a break? I just asked this right now. Do we need to take 5 minutes? Seeing none, okay, we'll move forward. At least we'll try to get through the first pass, and we'll take a short break at the end of the first pass after we've determined what the figures are before we go through the second pass. So the next applicant is the Hilton Head Rec Association. Their ask is $35,000. Does anybody have any recommendation or comment?
Full fund, a Wingfest and Oyster Festival, very, very popular, well-attended, tourism-oriented events.
Concur.
Concur.
I don't see it, but yeah.
Agreed.
And the chair would make a comment when I listened to their, I was worried about marketing. And then when I saw what the markets they were marketing into, which included Atlanta, Charlotte, Columbia, Charleston, and Greenville, well, that, those are the markets from which we would draw for a day event. So that made sense to me as well. So for the full funding, $35,000 for the Hilton Head Rec Association. Staff, please place that in their column. The next applicant is the Hilton Head Island St. Patrick's Day Parade. Zendaya or staff, I'm asking you, I saw that there were some questions on Turk qualifications on this one. What is the situation with this applicant on that?
Yes, sir. So in order for this applicant to receive at minimum $41,000, even though they did ask for 50, they would need more category 2 and 4 to even reach the 50 based on what their budget was. So as of right now, 41,235 is their full amount that they are able to receive based on their budget, which is less than the Turk allowable amount. However, we want to be careful with the Turk allowable amount versus what is actually in their budget that they are allowed to be, or they can be reimbursed for.
Okay, so as I understand at this point, full funding by Turk requirements, full funding would be $41,235. Okay, with that in mind, does anybody have any recommendations or comments? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Fully fund.
All right, any other comments or questions as to funding?
Fully fund for me.
Okay,
I'm the same, fully fund to that maximum amount of 41,235.
Same
all
with-
right,
Concur.
all right. Seeing none, Chair would ask staff, please place the figure of $41,235 in the column for the St. Patrick's Day Parade. The next applicant is the Hilton Head Island Wine and Food Festival. They have requested funding this year in the amount of $130,000. Any questions or comments or recommendations?
I'd fully fund it.
Okay, we have the recommendation of fully funding. Any other recommendations at this point?
Fully fund.
Any disagreement with fully funding?
Fully fund for me.
I'm seeing none on the screen, so the chair asks staff to please place the sum of $130,000 in the column for the Hilton Head Island Wine and Food Festival. The next applicant is the Hilton Head Island Chamber of Commerce. Their ask this year, request, is $350,000 for their primary grant. And there may be some questions in regarding to their association with one of the other applicants that's here today as to how to fund them because of their cooperation in certain endeavors. But their ask is $350,000 under their grant.
It's
Mr. Berghaus.
480.
It's
I have
four-
480, Jim.
It's 480.
I'm sorry, I had them in the wrong order. I have these on my thing, 480, sorry. Normally I have the request and the grant, and I've reversed it on my sheet for that order, I'm sorry. Okay, it's 480, I'm sorry. Anybody have any comments? Yes, Mr. Berghausen.
This is a tough one for me, and I'm not going to win a popularity contest on this one, but to me, this throws the accountability alarm. I'm concerned that the chamber isn't showing us any concrete measures of what incremental benefit we're going to receive by granting this supplemental grant. I'm not one who subscribes to the more you spend, the more you save. I mean, so the chamber just wants to spend more money all the time. I think they have key performance indicators like revenue per room, occupancy rates. They have a number of key performance indicators. They could come to us and say, with this supplemental grant, I'm going to be able to move my key performance indicator from A to B. But there's no commitment to produce an incremental result. And so I don't know when we draw a line on the continued escalation of their requests. We've gone from 250 to 350 and now to 480. Personally, I'd be inclined to limit it to 350. And so maybe in the future we can get better documentation.
Okay, I have a proposal at 350. Does anybody else wish to make a recommendation or any other comments regarding this? You know, the question I have is this: is their cooperation with the Golf Course Owners Association with the money we're going to give to them, and there's a question in their budget whether or not they should receive full funding either. And the fact that they're doing pass this all along their grant to the Chamber of Commerce as part of their cooperation agreement, whether or not that should be done. But any further comment? If there's not, and if there's no objection, then the chair is going to ask that the figure of $350,000 be placed in that column for the Chamber of Commerce at this time.
Mr.
Seeing
Chairman, I
none?
would recommend, no, Mr. Chairman, I would recommend full funding on this. As the chamber's job is to drive tourism to this island, I think they do a fantastic job. We talked about seeing new faces on this island for the first time, going to new events. Those people don't just accidentally land on our island. There's work behind the scenes and behind the curtain to make that happen. I think we can ask for more accountability from the chamber. But I believe that the work they do is vital to the tourism growing on our island, attracting new folks, tapping into new markets, getting folks to book planes to the island. I mean, they have a large umbrella and a responsibility for driving the tourism dollars to this island. I do agree it is a significant jump from a 350 to a 480. But I see no reason not to fully fund that at this time. The funding is there. We need the tourism to come to the island. That's what this money is for. And again, they touch a lot of folks. They do a lot of research. They're able to track movement on folks and have a fantastic conversion rate. So my recommendation would be to fully fund. I see no reason not to, with the increased amount of tourism dollars that came to the island post-pandemic and into this year as well. There's a lot of work being done to make that happen. Eyes on this island through a lot of different events isn't cheap. And my recommendation is full funding.
Okay, and the only, Ms. Martin.
I'll agree with Mr. Arnold on this one, fully funding. However, I also agree with Mr. Berghauser in terms of have them show us better KPIs with the incremental funds. But like I said earlier, I can attest that this year we have seen a different level of tourism come to the island that we had not seen before. And I don't think that, people just happen on this island. It's because of the promotion, the advertising, and the fact that, it is one of the number one islands in the country. So I also agree with fully funding.
And the only question the chair would have is that when we received, when we got our budget from them back in April to approve or recommend their budget with the city, their main budget, this request was already sitting there in a sub file of that request. So my question is, if it was known back then in April for approval, why not make it one request and put the whole thing in one package instead of having it as two separate packages voted on 2 different times? I mean, it was part of their budget package back then. So that's my question. Mr. Thomas.
Jim, I think, there are 2 issues in my mind. And one of them is in the fact that the chamber are consummate pros at doing what they do, and they do a hell of a job of it. But Mr. Berghausen's comments on incrementality and measurement of incremental return, I think, are extremely valid. And so I would support full funding, but I also would support the requirement that we receive more detailed information on the effect on the key performance indicators that the money will have in future requests.
In other words, send a message to them that we do need stronger KPIs based on the funding that we're approving, if we approve it.
Agreed.
Ms. Johnson, did you have a comment?
Oh, no, I was just saying, I do agree that with this discussion, that's the message, that we need to see greater accountability there in terms of the KPIs. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to poll the members of and I'm going to give you 2 options. Mr. Berghausen's suggestion at 350, which would be partial funding, and the request of the organization at 480. And I'm going to either answer full or partial funding, and then we'll do a poll. And if the committee members don't object, then that will be the figure that we stick in during our first round. Mr. Arnold.
Full funding.
Ms. Johnson.
Full funding.
Ms. Martin.
Full funding.
Mr. Berghausen.
I'm at partial.
Mr. Farrell.
Full funding.
Mr. Thomas.
Full funding with a strong proviso relative to future requests.
And the chair would recommend partial funding. So the matter is 5 members recommending full funding, 2 members recommending partial funding. Therefore, the majority carries. We will place the figure of $480,000 in the column for the Hilton Head Chamber of Commerce during the first run. So staff, please place the figure of $480,000 in the column for the Hilton Head Chamber of Commerce. The next applicant is one that we've agreed to pass on. That is the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra. I'm going to ask staff at this time during first run to please place the figure of 0 as a placekeeper on the spreadsheet. So we will come back to that at a later time. So the next applicant that we're considering during this first run at this time is the Lean Ensemble Theater. They have made a request of $40,000. Is there any comments, questions, or recommendations? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Fully fund.
Okay, we have full funding on the board. Is there anybody that disagrees with fully funding the Lean Ensemble Theater at this time? I'm not seeing any disagreement or objection to that. So at this point, I'm going to ask staff to place the figure of $40,000 in the column for the Lean Ensemble Theater. Okay, the next one coming up for discussion is the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association. Do we have, it's my understanding that we have one or more recusements from that. Is that correct?
I'm signing off. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Farrell, just make sure you can hear us, but you can go ahead and sign off to mute and turn off your video if you wish. Anybody else have any recusals? Okay, so we have one member recused, Mr. Farrell. Want that shown on the record. They have a request of $100,000 from this committee. Is there any recommendations, discussions, comments? Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, this is another tough one, and we've all talked about it. Accountability is a concern. We don't get hard data from them. We've asked for it, and it's just a pass through. Their whole application is built on this being a public relations effort. We have a public relations expert. It's hired by the town council. It's the DMO. That's their job. So this isn't about whether we ought to have that golf booklet. Absolutely, we should have the golf booklet, but the chamber understands how important golf is. They will do the book. And so I think we should stop the almost charade, I'm sorry to use the word, of this pass to grant it there so they can just turn around and give it to the chamber to make the book. I'd rather give $50,000 more to the chamber and just eliminate this step.
So, are you making a recommendation at this point, Mr. Berghausen?
Yes, I'll recommend that we don't give this grant and that we actually increase the chamber's award by $50,000 and stop this middleman.
Okay, any other comments or recommendations? Ms. Johnson?
Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. I would agree that I think there's a duplication of effort here. And I know we're looking at each one on their own merits, but my support of the chamber at full funding anticipated the fact that I would recommend that we not fully fund this LCGOA. So, however, I would support them being funded at the 50,000 level at first pass, not 100.
Mr. Arnold, well, then I'll get to you, Ms. Martin. I'm sorry. Mr. Arnold
Sure.
first.
My recommendation is going to be full funding on this. I do understand that it is a duplicate and it's the waters are fairly muddied from the way that has been set up. But the Low Country Golf Owners Association is a very specific targeted market when it comes to golf on this island. That's a huge operation to ask a chamber to do, in my opinion. The folks who run the Low Country Golf Owners Association have the connections. They know where golf is. They understand the importance of bringing in dedicated writers and relationships that need to be grown to continue to grow the game of golf on the island. I can see where it is considered as a pass-through. I do understand that. I have a hard time and struggle with the recommendation of on our first pass to decrease the chamber by 130. And now, after the first pass, add 50,000 to eliminate this. I don't understand that one. I feel like the combined efforts between the chamber and the Low Country Golf Owners Association can be cleaned up. But I do believe that the efforts they put in and the public relations and their efforts drive golf on this island. And it's the #2 draw to this island. There's over 20 golf courses on this island that bring in millions of dollars, that bring in and provide countless numbers of jobs on this island. So without their efforts, you know, who's reaching and pulling in golf to the island? That's just my comments. I would recommend full funding.
Ms. Martin first. Okay, go ahead.
I hadn't thought about what Jim proposed, and I'm certainly not opposed to that. I did not know that the waters were so muddied. I kind of agree with the recommendation of partial funding with the 50,000, but giving it back to the chambers so they can work together in a more concerted effort and use those funds a little bit better to promote this golf booklet. And I think at the end of the day, I think it's the chamber's job ultimately, probably with the support of the Golf Association, to promote this. So I'm in agreement of 50,000 added to the chamber and not funding this organization, but as a forcing function for them to work more closely with the chamber so the waters are less muddy.
Mr. Berghausen.
Yeah, and I was only going to point out that they submitted a 2022 budget, and their whole application is saying this effort is a PR effort. Well, the budget line in their 2022 budget is $50,000. So that's why I'm in favor of supporting that $50,000 need. And if all they do is turn this money over to the chamber to go do it, I don't see where they're having so much involvement. They're turning it over to the chamber to do it.
Mr. Thomas.
Procedural question and a comment. Procedurally, are we able to restrict our grants? Are we able to restrict them to particular uses?
Well, I think that's part of the process, is to say, generally, is to say, do they fall into promotion of tourism? I mean, that's.
I guess my question is kind of in line with Jim's recommendation, Julie's comments, et cetera. If we were able to restrict our grant funds with the chamber's use, I don't know why it wouldn't be possible to have with the chamber, similar to the marketing advisory board or council that they have, Low Country Golf Course Owners Council, that would advise the chamber on the usage of the $50,000 that would be added to the chamber's budget for 2022.
Good point.
It's Julie's concept of working together. It would be a way of ensuring that the additional funds being committed to the chamber would be used for the purpose that they're intended for. That's why I was asking the question.
Okay. And then my comment goes back to Mr. Berghausen's and receiving the updated financials yesterday, and they mirrored what the financials were that we had at the time of the hearing, is that I don't see the need in total for this promotion program for more than $50,000, because that's what their budget shows. So what I see in front of us right now is 0, 50,000, or full funding. We could poll our members, I guess, at this point and try to figure out what we want to do. So with that in mind, with the 6 of us that are, yes, Martin?
Can we just clarify the 50,000 or full fund? Somebody's dog's not happy. Can we just clarify?
Sorry, folks,
that
that's mine. Let me.
Some of us have said, the 50,000 is a forcing function to put towards the chamber, so the organization can work closer hand in hand with the chamber to really make good utilization of those funds. Can that be in the polling?
Well, I guess a vote for 0 funding would mean that you're going to go back and revisit the chamber budget.
Okay.
Yeah,
If-
and that's the way I read
That way, that's fine.
because I see that there's a need. I perceive a need. The question is, who provides that need?
Right.
Is it the DMO, or is it this organization working in concert with them? And this organization has kind of shown through their financials that their required need to do that is $50,000, not $100,000 like their grant application says. Their financials or proposed financials for the coming year would show only a need of $50,000.
Yes.
So I guess the question being is, and I put this out there, a vote for 0 or no funding would mean that we're going to revisit the chamber's budget in the next round to include some funding for that.
Okay, then that's fine. If you clarify it that way, that's
And the
fine.
other 2 votes would be 50,000 based
Okay.
on what they presented as need, and the $100,000 requested based on what their request is, I guess, would be their wants, needs and wants in that regard. So at this point, what I'm going to do is poll the members. And Mr. Arnold,
Full fund.
Ms. Johnson,
50,000 based on presentation of need.
okay, Ms. Martin,
0 fund based on second pass look at how they use the funds in conjunction with the chamber.
okay, Mr. Berghausen,
With what Julie said.
okay, Mr. Thomas,
0 fund in the same context.
and the chair would vote 0 funding in the same context. So what we're going to do is, for the time being, we're going to place 0 funding in the column for the Low Country Golf Owners Association, with the caveat that in round 2, we will revisit the chambers and we'll the request, ask, and recommendation for the chamber's budget based on our actions with this organization.
Can I just
Okay.
ask a clarifying question when we go to round 2? If
Yes,
we do that in round 2, is it possible for us to be extremely specific into our recommendation as to why we're doing what we're doing?
I think we're doing that now, but I guess we can. Again, remember, these are reimbursable funds, so if it doesn't fit into a category.
Okay.
That-
All right. that's
Again,
fine.
if you spend it on PR, I'm assuming that again, when you assume certain things happen, but I'm assuming that any organization can redo their budget if they have room in their
Okay.
request, to do that. And that's another thing we'll have to look at. Again, I can do that while we're here, but it's another thing we'd have to look at. And if we decide in the discussion of that other applicant that we can't add that funding because it puts them over a Turk requirement or otherwise, then we might have to come back and revisit this one and say full or partial funding, or again, none.
Okay.
But yeah, each one of these discussions will be had again. We will go through the list again, and even ones that we think we've decided on, we're going to at least call them forward and say any further discussion, any further, we'll go right down the line again.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay. And until we do that, until we've made a full and final decision on the 33, we're not going to discuss the symphony orchestra. So that's the other thing, is we may be 4 passes into this before we even get to the symphony orchestra, because
Okay.
I want to make sure that we decide all these other ones fully and fairly before we get to that one. And that then hopefully, once we get to that point, that won't take as long. That should be 1 pass to decide that organization, hopefully. So right now, based on the polling of the members who are eligible, with Mr. Farrell abstaining, we're putting 0 in the column for the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association. Okay, the next applicant up for consideration is the Long Cove Club. The request is $30,000. This is a first-time request by this organization. Any comments, questions, recommendations?
No brainer for me.
Anybody
Agree.
else?
Agree. Category.
Agreed.
Okay.
First time request from a proven organization.
Yeah, this is an exciting one. The only thing that, I think with listening to the presentation is because it's a collegiate event, it would go on to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That was the only kind of drawback for me, but I still agree with the fully fund.
And again, I think that's an opportunity though to get another class of tourists
Absolutely.
Amen.
down here.
Yeah.
Not weekend, they're gonna come down here to see something during the week, and of course, they can extend their stay if they wish to. Any
Yeah.
objection to the chair placing the sum of $30,000 in the column for the Long Cove Club? Seeing none, the chair will ask the staff to please place the sum of $30,000 in the column for the Long Cove Club. The next applicant on today's docket is Low Country Gullah. Their request is $75,000. Any comments, questions, recommendations? Yes, Mr. Berghausen.
This is number 5 of 8 applicants that tripped one of my buckets, and it was accountability and being able to show us that this is not just general PR work for the area, marketing the benefits of our area. We weren't really able to bring this back to show us we're putting heads in beds, and that was a concern for me. So I see this perhaps more as a DMO function than a specific project.
Anybody else have any comments, questions? Yes, Ms. Johnson.
Yeah, I do support this. I think this is in the area of being a cultural, a tourist influencer, a new term again, I'm learning throughout this process. And having looked at their website, I think that they add significantly to the history and to the culture of the area. And I think it does and would attract even more given today's traveler. I think it would attract people to Hilton Head expressly for the purpose of learning about the culture and the history that's here.
Any other comments? Ms. Johnson, do you have a recommendation?
I recommend full funding.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or recommendations?
I too recommend full funding, and I totally agree with Ms. Johnson. And after listening to the presentations, with the Gullah history and all that, I'm seeing and feeling that this island is attracting more and more tourists that want different things than, believe me, I'm a golfer at heart, so that's what I came to Hilton Head in the first thing. But we're seeing a different type of tourist now coming to the island. It's not just the golfers or the bicyclers or the beach people. They want a little bit more substance, and I think this provides it. And this has the opportunity to provide even more.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Well, I support Jim's comments relative to the accountability side of the ledger. I see that Low Country Gullah has made dramatic steps forward in increasing their ability to provide us the kind of data that we need to know that they're influencing is bringing people to Hilton Head Island. And I believe that they will be able to increase that capability in the future. Just the increase in the performance metrics of Low Country Gullah over the year that they've been fully functioning, to me tells me that they are reaching and more than likely attracting a large audience. They're also providing a very important function, and that is it's kind of a one-stop site for people who are seeking information on the Gullah culture, and specifically as it relates to Hilton Head. And to have that ability, I think, online from a marketing perspective, since social media marketing is so much more important these days, is something that we drastically need. So I strongly support full funding, despite the accountability concerns that I think Jim rightly raises.
Any disagreement with us at the present time recommending full funding during this pass? If I don't see any disagreement or otherwise, I'm going to recommend it. Again, we have certain drivers, you know, and golf's a driver, beaches are a driver and stuff, but there are also the complementary issues of the, you know, so once you decide to come here, you look to see what else you're going to do when you're down here. And I believe that in the area of cultural drivers and in experiences, I think this is one of those organizations that is beneficial to the island. And while it might not be a driver, it is a positive for people. So.
I'm swayed. I'm swayed.
Well, just one other thing on that. I mean, upwards of 35% of the people who are surveyed who have come to Hilton Head will cite that it either extremely important or important that the cultural heritage assets of the island are here in making their decision as to what destination to choose. So, you know, that's a growing number of people, as Margaret has pointed out, and as Julie has attested to from her position. So, yeah, I think this is not a no-brainer necessarily, but this is something that is certainly a worthwhile opportunity to support.
I want to add just one thing to that gala presentation. They have indeed year over year shown a great deal of you know, growth and much better statistics to us during their presentation based, you know, as far as reach and whatnot. So I commend them for that. That's one of a few organizations that said went back to the drawing board with our feedback and really came back to show us a difference.
All right, if I see no objection from any of our members, then I will ask staff at this point to place a sum of $75,000 in the column for the Low Country Gola. Our next applicant is the Mitchellville Preservation Project. Their request for 2022 is $185,000. Is Mr. Thomas, you just got a thumbs up there.
Yeah, fully fund. I don't know if everybody saw the article in the paper today, but the discovery of the hearth, rediscovery of the hearth, I should say, which is an original feature of the town of Mitchellville, is extremely exciting. And it's just kind of a portent for a future, I think, that's going to be remarkable for the Mitchellville site. So yeah, full funding.
Okay, everybody appeared to have a lot of thumbs up and a lot of nods and things. Is there anybody that would disagree at this point with fully funding this request? Is there any further discussion? All right. Ask staff at this point to place the sum of $185,000 into column for the Mitchellville Presentation Project. The next organization is the NIBCAA. Their request is $205,000. I'll make sure I have that right to see a time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, okay, I had my columns right this time. Anybody have any recommendations, comments, questions? Mr.
I would fund. It is a decrease from prior year too, which I think is significant.
Okay. Ms. Johnson, you were going to make a comment?
Yes, I would recommend full funding and commend them for asking for $20,000 less, even as they're extending the gala events 12 months of a year beyond the month of February. So I think it's a great use of the funds. It's a responsible use of the funds that they have.
Mr. Arnold?
I just recommend full funding on this one. I agree that their ask has gone down and they continue to provide an important service for the island and to our nativers.
Ms. Martin, are you
I
signaling?
agree, and I agree with Ms. Johnson's comments in terms of, you know, less ask, but they're now kind of extending their outreach to 12 months versus just that 1 month. So I really like that approach.
This is a bucket number 5, no brainer.
All right, seeing no objection to the recommendation, I'm going to ask that the staff place the sum of $205,000 in the column of the NIBCAA. The next one is the South Carolina Low Country Tourism Commission. This one raises some red flags for the chair, but I'm going to let everybody else have some say on this as well. Yes, Mr. Berghausen.
Okay, yeah, I think they're applying to the wrong place. I think they're applying to be a DMO. And town council hires one or more DMOs. This is their decision. They've made a decision to have just one DMO, and it's the Chamber of Commerce. I don't think I want us to go around town council and start hiring additional DMOs. So I think the right answer here is 0.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Martin, I'm sorry.
I totally agree. I think they're trying to do the chamber's job or the DMO's job, and I don't think we need a duplicate of that. Granted, their ask is not huge, but I just think we can allocate those funds for better use than what they would be using them for.
Mr. Arnold, you look like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I agree. During the presentation, they weren't able to tell us how much efforts were going to driving tourism on the island itself. It was just to the Low Country region. I believe that these funds are to be focused on driving tourism to Hilton Head Island. And without that measuring stick, it's hard to make a recommendation to give them funding blindly without results of what are you driving to the island. There's no measuring stick there. So I agree that they are just duplicating the efforts of the hired DMO. So my recommendation is 0.
Yes, Mr. Thomas.
I just think it's important to think about this being a request from a site and a facility, not an organization that's performing a function. And it's a site and a facility that for people who are coming to this area for the first time is one of the ones that they are generally attracted to off of 95 at exit 33. Well, it's not a Hilton Head specific organization, and I have my own issues with that, but well, it's not a Hilton Head specific organization. I think about the future as Mitchellville is being developed, as the Santa Elena Center at Coastal Discovery Museum comes online. These are nationally impactful and important assets that Hilton Head has and will have, and things that I believe need to be promoted and marketed in as many different ways as possible to the audiences that are both incidental, traveling in from outside the area, as well as people who are coming here purposefully for them. But this is a communal group. And I think that, what they're asking is a share of a budget that, is for Hilton Head to do a part of supporting the marketing that they do that benefits Hilton Head sites. So I think that in light of the amount of the funding, I would certainly recommend some funding to them, whether it's partial, looking for better clarification on the metrics as it applies to Hilton Head, or full. But I would recommend funding at least 50%.
Okay, so figure around 32,450, it would be 50%. Anybody else have any comments? I don't know if we've gone all the way around the pike or not. Again, I stated my
I'm sorry,
concern.
Jim, what is the request on that?
I think it's wasn't it 64.9?
64.9.
Yeah. So 32,450 would be 50%. I do not want to get into business of hiring DMOs. And I think that's kind of what we're doing in this regard. If this organization wants the town to represent them And I've driven by that location several times. Maybe tourists would look, I knew it was there, you know, but again, that's something you'd have to search for. At this point, I think it's a little speculative for them to how much they're going to actually drive to the island. I wasn't impressed with the numbers they were giving us. I mean, they were basically, I can stop at any rest station in South Carolina and get cards that are there for activities and organizations and stuff. And I don't think that they're providing anything different than what the rest areas would provide. So, Jim, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, it's just, if they are effective at reaching an audience that our own chamber isn't reaching, I'm surprised that our own chamber hasn't elected to use the services of this DMO.
And that would be one where I would
Actually,
ask, there's not some cooperation or cooperative between the two of them, if that's the
Yep.
case.
well, there is. I mean, the other thing is that Ariana, head of the CVB here, serves on their board, so there is representation of those interests in their decisions and thinking about their marketing efforts.
So why doesn't the chamber include this $64,900 in their budget for providing DMO services for the town of Hilton Head Island?
I get the point, and I just wanted to state my thoughts relative to this particular request.
All right, so if any other discussion, because what we have right now, what I'm perceiving, and I don't want to, is I'm seeing requests for, several people have recommended zero funding, and one person, at least one person, has recommended partial funding at a sum of about 50%, which would be $32,450. Are there any other recommendations? Okay, John, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to say proceed with a vote.
Okay, what I'm going to do is poll the members then at this point. So, Mr. Arnold, what the choices that I see is zero funding or 50% funding. So, Mr. Arnold, what is your vote?
My vote would be $0 on this one, please.
Okay, Ms. Johnson,
Zero funding.
Ms. Martin,
Zero funding.
Mr. Berghausen,
Zero.
Mr. Farrell,
50%.
Mr. Thomas.
50%.
Okay, the chair would vote zero funding. So vote is 5-2. Therefore, majority is recommending zero funding for the Low Country Tourism Commission. And I would ask staff to please place that figure of zero on the in their column. The next applicant at this time is the Sea Pines Forest Preserve. This is the first time grant request, and they've requested the sum of $35,000. Anybody have any comments, questions, or recommendations? Mr. Berghausen.
Category 5. No brainer.
All right, there you go. John, there's your no brainer. I see Richard has got a thumbs up. Does anybody have any, is there anybody opposed to this before we go any further? Okay, I don't see any opposition to this. So therefore, based on a voice vote or a face vote, I guess, of the members, Chair would ask that staff please place the sum of $35,000 in the column for the Sea Pines Forest Preserve. The next applicant is the Hilton Head Sea Turtle Patrol, and they've made a request of what, $47,900. Make sure I have my figures right. Anybody have any recommendations, comments, requests? And to start off with, I will say, in regards to the questions that Ms. Martin, Ms. Johnson, everybody else has raised, this is one of those organizations that came to us a year ago and didn't quite know how the process worked, and asked for something they really couldn't get, and they've learned very quickly in order to get an out of cycle grant and in order to make a grant request this year. So I'm saying that if organizations follow their lead or what the feedback we give them, I think that they can be successful within a short period of time. So that's why I'm making that statement now, in case any of our applicants feel that we've been unfair to them today. Here's, take a look at what we've asked, and you can get a favorable result in about a year or so if you have your ducks in a row or your turtles in a row or whatever it is you want to do. So any recommendations, Ms. Martin?
I suggest we fully fund. They are the top organization that came back to the drawing board, and Amber had also someone with her, and they presented some amazing numbers of what they're doing, what they would do with these funds. So I fully recommend full funding.
Okay, Ms. Johnson agrees. Is there anybody? I see thumbs. Anybody have any disagreement or opposition to placing the sum of $47,900 in the column? Okay, seeing none, the chair asks staff to please place sum of $47,900 in the column for the Hilton Head Sea Turtle Patrol. The next applicant on the docket is the Shelter Cove Harbor Company. Their request this year is for $150,000. Anybody have any recommendations, comments?
I'll start by saying that they're wanting to extend their operation, adding additional weeks to what they do. They have a great presentation. They touch a lot of folks that come to the island each summer, return year after year. It's a family tradition to a lot of these folks. It's a continued something that they'll pass on through the years, and you can kind of bank on Tuesday nights down at Shelter Cove. It's going to be a busy happening spot. So I would recommend full funding on this one.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
I agree with Mr. Arnold.
I agree.
Yeah, I see a lot of nodding. All right. See thumbs up, nodding heads. Okay. Seeing no opposition to the recommendation, I would ask staff to place the sum of $150,000 in the column for the Shelter Cove Harbor Company. The next applicant up for consideration and on the docket is TEDx Hilton Head, which has a first-time request of $45,000. And I'm going to ask staff, the way I looked at it, there were some issues with their Turk qualification. So I want to get that resolved off front. The way I calculated it, and maybe I'm wrong, is that they're only entitled to a maximum of 41.4, or am I adding things up wrong? No, okay.
So for this one, Turk does allow for 41.4. However, this is one of those ones where within their budget was less than the amount that within their project budget was less than the amount that they are requesting. So for this one, this is actually 3205.
Okay, so it's based on their budget projection and based on the percentages from that. Okay. All right, so the maximum reimbursable that we can award is $32,050. So does anybody from any of the members have any questions, comments, recommendations?
I'm concerned that the ask is a little ahead of the delivery here. The cost per tourist is really high. We just don't have enough of a track record. Personally, I would partially fund this one to try to help them get started, but I'd like to see a little stronger results before we move to that maximum amount.
Okay. Do you have any recommendation that you'd like to present?
I'll put 50% out
So
there.
a figure around $16,000, would that be what you're, okay. Okay, so there's a recommendation of 16,000 made. Is anybody else have any comments or questions, recommendations? Mr. Arnold.
I would just agree with Jim on this one that, it's a first time request. I think that there is substance there. I think it can be a great event, but we need to have a couple events, build some momentum, see some results, and then, they have the option in future years to apply and increase, but I'd be comfortable with the $16,000 recommendation.
Okay. I saw Miss Martin and Miss Johnson. I'm gonna go with Miss Martin.
Yeah,
next.
I'm almost inclined, it is a fairly small request, even at the 3250. This is an organization that has the possibility of bringing a different level of tourists, a higher educated level of tourists too. And it's a first request, I think, just to get them going and stuff. This could be one of those that we think about fully funding, and I would recommend fully funding.
Okay, Miss Johnson, you were gonna comment?
Yes, my notes were recommending 15.5, but I'll go with 16,000 for partial funding.
Okay. Any other recommendations? Right now on the board, we would have $32,050 and $16,000. Is there any other recommendations? Okay, so what I'm going to do again is I'm going to poll our members, and we will consider full funding at the 32,000 level and partial funding at the $16,000 level. So please indicate full or partial funding. Mr. Arnold.
Partial funding at 16.
Okay. Ms. Johnson.
Partial at 16.
Ms. Martin.
Full funding at 32.
Mr. Berghausen.
Partial at 16.
Mr. Farrell.
Partial at 16.
And Mr. Thomas.
Partial at 16, with the felt need to see a little more substance on the tourist attraction strength of this particular proposal.
Okay. And the chair, based on those two proposals, would vote for partial funding. My recommendation wouldn't have been for any funding, but again, I think that's just based on the information we have now. I think with partial funding and the ability, knowing that we will have, I think, have some funds available after we're done today, we'll be in a position we were last year. And there will be some ability for out of cycle grants. And I think if with that for 2022, as they get closer to whatever events they're going to put on or something else and get some better numbers, maybe they can come back and we'll have something else to work with at that point that could help us, this organization. Again, it's a different class of tourists than the other ones. It's no, better or worse, golfers and erudites or whatever else. They're all tourists, and so we need to get a great mix of people down here. And so, would the staff please place the sum of 16,000 in the column for the TEDx Hilton Head. The next group coming up, Boys and Girls Clubs of Hilton Head, their grant request for this year is $30,000. Any comments, recommendations, questions? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
Fully fund.
Okay. Anybody else have any other funding recommendations other than fully fund? I see a thumb up from Mr. Farrell. I see some more thumbs up. Okay, well, I'm seeing a thumbs up, so I guess we're either pulling out a plum or we're voting yes. So, and the chair would agree. That was would have been my recommendation. So what I'm going to do is ask staff at this point to place the sum of $30,000 in the column for the Boys and Girls Club of Hilton Head Island. The next applicant would be and is the Coastal Discovery Museum. Their request for 2022 is $325,000. Is there any questions, recommendation or otherwise?
Category 5.
Category 5.
Yes, sir. That's the only time I want to hear category 5 on this island is with things like this. And I'm not going to make light of that. But again, there are certain drivers to tourism on the island and certain facilities that this is world class. I mean, when you're talking about a Smithsonian affiliate and everything else, this is and I think with the things we're going to see in the years to come with the St. Helena addition and other things, I think it's going to be it's going to be an additional asset to the island. I mean, it's already an asset, but it's just going to get bigger and better. So I'm going to ask staff at this point to place the sum of $325,000 in the column for the Coastal Discovery Museum. Paper doesn't seem to get any smaller, but we're going to keep moving on at this point unless somebody signals otherwise. The next applicant is the First Tee of the Low Country. Do we have recusals on that one? I see that John has. Yes. Okay. Go ahead, John. You want to tune in? There you go. This one is their grant request is for $40,000. Have any recommendations, comments, questions?
I'd
Fully
recommend full
fund.
funding. Yeah, fully fund on this one.
All right, don't fight over it. Okay. Anybody disagree with full funding of this organization? Seeing none, everybody's heads in the affirmative. All their answers seem to be. Chair also would agree that full funding is warranted. So therefore, ask staff to place the sum of $40,000 in the column for the First Tee of the Low Country. And we will move on to our next applicant, which is the Heritage Library.
I will recuse myself.
Okay. You have a recusal on that one. Let me ask staff, do we have any issues based on their application with Turk qualifications? Seem to have notes that say that we do. So let me see.
So with the Heritage Library, based on their projected project budget, it was just short of what they need to fully qualify for Category 2. However, they do overqualify in Category 1. So Category 1 could potentially cover the shortfall for them. So they still could receive their full ask of 120.
Okay, that's what I wanted to, okay, so that is available. Okay, so the ask is 120 and they could qualify for full funding under Turk requirements. So is there any recommendation from the committee or any member of the committee as to funding? And
Full
if
funding.
I'm
all
good
right.
to full fund on this one.
All right, anybody disagree with full funding? Seeing no disagreement in the gestures of the members, the chair would also recommend full funding. I was recommending it to the point of Turk qualifications, but with the assurance of staff that they would fully qualify. I'm going to ask staff at this point to place the sum of $120,000 in the column for the Heritage Library. And likewise, I'm going to ask this question on our next applicant, the Outside Foundation. Do we have some issues with their Turk qualifications? Let me see here. Their ask is 40,000. And what I see is right now they're only Turk qualified to 34.4. Is that correct, Zendaya?
Yes, that is correct. For their Category 6 that they were requesting, they are just shy of what they were requesting that they would be able to receive. So yes, 34,400 is what they are qualified to fully receive.
Okay, so I'm going to, as chairman, put out that 34.4 would be full funding for this organization. So is there any, is what they're qualified for. So is there any recommendations or questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Thomas.
That's thumbs up. Recommend
Okay.
full funding
All right.
per the Turk
Agree.
requirement.
Exactly.
Okay, so anybody disagrees with full funding pursuant to Turk qualifications?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask staff at this time to place the sum of 34.4 in the column for the Outside Foundation. The next organization up for consideration is the Sandbox. And they've made a request of $44,400. Is there any recommendation, questions, comments? I have this full funding. I don't mean to speak for anybody else. Ms. Johnson?
Bucket 5.
That's a category 5, full.
Okay,
funding.
there's another category
Yeah,
5. So,
yeah.
all right.
Just to
Go
say,
ahead.
just to comment that they made, I think, one of the most astounding cases and enlightening cases, at least in my part, relative to the draw that they actually provide for tourists once they're here. And my belief is that a large group of the people who would come here because there's that quality of facility available to them. But just a great job on the presentation, I thought, of what their work is providing the island.
But again, from their presentation, and unfortunately they canceled our ability to go and see the thing firsthand. I've not seen the inside of the facility except through their presentation. It appears to be a remarkable facility, and it's in a prime location now, having moved down the road, so to speak, closer to Coligny and right on our new Celebration Park, where I hope to be later this afternoon for the last party in the park this afternoon. But I think the chair would agree with a recommendation of 44.4. Is there anybody, or 44.4, is there any objection to that? I see none. Seeing none, the chair would ask staff at this point to place the sum of 44.4, make sure you're saying that right, in the column for the sandbox. Oh, I see, there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, it appears. Okay. And I don't mean to be facetious, but last but not least, on our first round here is the World Affairs Council of Hilton Head Island. Their request, let me see here what I had. Their request is 10,000. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or otherwise? Mr. Berghausen.
Well, the obvious challenge here is tourists. Is this really a tourist attraction? And I think that makes it tough, but it's also only $10,000, and it's worth that small investment to see one more year if they can show us that this can be a tourist event. So I would fully fund, but mostly because it's such a nominal amount.
Ms. Johnson?
Go ahead, Ms. Johnson.
I'm sorry.
I was still, my notes say decrease, but I can't be specific to decrease to what amount. So as first pass, I would say fully funded at the 10,000 level.
Okay, so Ms. Martin.
My question, based on what Jim mentioned, the 8,900 plus that we allowed them, that we funded them in 2021, I don't recall during their presentation them showing us incremental, tourism as a result of that. So I had questions about this one. I put a big question mark as to either whether we fund it all or partial fund, but this one I'm not that comfortable with.
Again, this is one that during the pandemic, there was no,
Right.
these were all online. So I don't know.
So you can't attract tourists online, obviously.
Yeah, and I don't know how much that will change in the future. Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
Jim, to me, this fits in the same category as TEDx. I mean, generally, in terms of the nature of the potential for tourism and tourist attraction. And I guess in the same context as the treatment that we provided TEDx Hilton Head, I would recommend a 50% award here of $5,000.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, or? Nope. Okay, what I've got in front of me right now is I have partial funding at 5,000 and full funding at 10,000. Are there, if there are no other recommendations, what I'd like to do is poll our members at this time. Mr. Arnold, are you there? Oh, there
I
you
am.
are.
I had to switch.
Okay.
God, so I mean, it's technology.
Oh, echo.
There we go.
Mr. Arnold, are you in favor of partial or full funding of the World Affairs Council?
I would do full funding, but with the challenge to them that we do need to see some results from tourism. It is such a small ask that, again, it's probably worth the investment to go ahead and give them some runway. But I think that the hourglass with this organization is running down. We need some more data from them if we're going to recommend moving forward. But recommendation of 10,000.
Okay, Ms. Johnson.
I'll revise my recommendation to 5,000.
Okay, so that would be partial funding. Okay.
Yes.
Ms. Martin.
Partial funding at 5, again, with the stipulation that they show us some numbers based on the fact that we had given them full funding in 2021. Understanding the pandemic, that's fine, but let's do 5,000 to be in line with TEDx.
Mr. Berghausen.
I think I've been swayed by the FedEx rationale, and so I'd vote for 50%.
Okay, Mr. Farrell.
I vote for the 50% in hopes that they can have a successful campaign in 2022 and get full funding in the future.
And Mr. Thomas.
50% funding.
Okay, and the chair had in his notes originally full funding, and we'll vote that way, but the majority is in a 5-2 vote. Majority votes for partial funding. So I'm asking that the staff at this time place the figure of $5,000 in the column for the World Affairs Council of Hilton Head. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have completed our first pass. And so I'm going to ask staff at this time to share their screen or otherwise, or somehow let us know what's happened. But what have we done over the last couple of hours?
Just a moment.
Okay.
I'm just going to take a 5-minute quick bathroom break and for my dog too. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, well, I can see the screen. Let me do that.
It looks like we're taking a,
See it? Oh,
yeah,
do
okay.
you want to take a break or?
No, this is fine.
Okay, let's go ahead and do this first, and then we'll take the break. We'll come back with round 2. So can you get that to full screen?
Is that on the full screen?
I got half the screen right now. I've
Okay,
got,
hold on. How about that? Is that better?
Can
Yeah.
you make it bigger?
yeah, some of us are blind. That's the reason why we asked that.
Okay, well, I'll make it. So
There you
this,
go.
this
All
is
right.
the bottom total, this 3,288,535. And I'm gonna ask that that you all just kind of make sure that that's where we are.
Yeah, I'm looking at the figures that are placed in.
I can confirm that's what I have as well.
Okay.
So
Well, good. I'm glad we have a tally keeper on the committee then.
I was keeping score.
I confirm that I have the same total.
That's great. I was a statistician for 8 years in both college and professional ranks, and I decided I wasn't gonna do that anymore. So, okay. So right now,
I'll do a little scroll down just for the public, if they're online watching, they can at least see that this is the column, these are the columns that we are currently
Right.
speaking of. And that is the number down here, 3.288535.
okay. Okay, so with that being confirmed as the numbers, that would make it, we have a little bit of wiggle room there. I'm going to call it about $500,000 wiggle room. We've got that available to us. So what I'm going to do at this point, I have on my clock on my computer that it is about 11:14 a.m. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call a recess for 10 minutes. So we will meet back up at 11:25, 11 minutes to be exact. 11:25, we will resume the meeting and we will start round 2. All right. See you back in 10 minutes, folks. Thank you. I have 11:26. Do we have all the members of our committee back on?
Mr. Fluker, I
Yes.
cannot start my video. Okay. The
Me
host
neither.
has The host
You
has
should
released.
Given permission, yes.
There we
You
go.
have to ask permission, ask pretty please, and they'll let you get back on.
And I don't know that I'm able to view either. Can y'all hear me? It's
We can hear
Julie.
you.
Okay, it's funny, I can't see myself.
There
so
should be a button on your screen somewhere that says start or stop. There you are.
There you go.
I
There
see
you
you
go.
now. Okay.
All righty.
That's
All
better,
right.
Julie.
Hi, Julie.
Yes, yes. I'm so glad to see your smiling face and everybody's smiling face. Actually, I can't wait till we can get back together and do these things
I'll,
in person.
in the meantime, Jim, I'll send you a wallet size of me if you'd like.
I'm gonna do a screen save, John.
No,
Never
John,
do
not that one. Not that one.
No.
Okay, everybody, we're back on session, so we probably should act like professionals. So we're getting ready to start round two. And again, I'm going to go through the 33 applicants that are timely filed. If anybody wishes to make any additional comments, questions, observations, please wave at the camera otherwise so that we can go through them. I think for the most part, we may have settled 85, 90% of them. But if there's any further discussion needs to be had, let's go ahead and have that and move on. So without knowing, I'm going to say, I'm sure the town staff has the second run already on their spreadsheet. So go ahead and have that available for themselves, not us at this point. So, and then we can run the tallies, which also our in-house statisticians will also keep track of as well. So is there any additional comments, questions, or anything of the nature involving the application of 12 Jewels of Life? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Johnson.
Yes, committee, during the break, I took the opportunity to check on this Thomas Edison quote that I want to share with regard to 12 Jewels. I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. Many of life's failures are people who do not realize how close they were to success when they gave up. And so I would like to say to 12 Jewels, and I would hope it could be shown in the minutes, that we've made some specific recommendations to them. And if appropriate, if the minutes could suggest that their need is to improve their financial position or picture, to provide more specific details, to seek partnerships in the community that would help to put meat on their vision, and to, again, come back with these improvements in mind. So if appropriate, if we could show some suggestions in the minutes and encourage them to not give up on what could be a wonderful idea and a great tourist attraction. People love to see young people succeed. We've got the best restaurants in the world that I'm sure would be happy to support them, but we need to see that. So I'd like to just offer them encouragement.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Can I follow that up, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, one specific recommendation might be that if they could get the letters of commitment from the partner restaurants that they are intending to work this with, that would have been, in my mind, a big step in the direction that we need to have in terms of the substantiating data or financial strength or whatever it might be. So even that would have helped quite a bit, I think.
May I ask a question of staff? Zendaya, when we do our recommendation letter, don't we list all the applicants that filed and make specific either recommendations or otherwise as part of that recommendation letter?
Yeah, yes, sir.
And then also the ones we don't fund or have partial, we explain in that letter, don't we, from our minutes and our discussions, the reasons for that in the recommendation letter?
That is also correct. Yes, sir.
And the applicants, do they get a copy of the recommendation letter as well?
Well, that is made a part of the minutes for the town council packet when it goes to decision day for them. So that is made a part of the official record, but just on the town council level.
Okay, so our discussions, when we've made a discussion like Ms. Johnson did and we did in the prior round, those discussions, or the essence of those discussions, is part of the recommendation letter. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Does that help you, Ms. Johnson? That we can make that, if they would be getting that from the town, from the meeting, just like we get our agenda and the agenda items offline, when it comes time for this meeting to take place with the town council, which I understand to be hopefully the first week of December is when they'll take up our recommendations. Part of their packet, and sometimes it's lengthy and sometimes it's big, but part of their packet for the full agenda will include a copy of the recommendation letter, and all of our discussions, or at least the meat of our discussions, is in that recommendation letter.
That is helpful. And do I hear that the applicant themselves, the 12 jewels, will they have the opportunity to see those recommendations? Again, if it's appropriate to be a part of the minutes.
They will see them as, there's a recommendation letter that goes out under my signature, the chairman's signature at the end of this process. And it states how we funded, who we funded, and it has the discussions about that. It then is presented as part of a packet then to the town council at their meeting. That recommendation letter, which includes all the 33 timely filed applicants and perhaps a 34th applicant, will state our reasoning and the amount of our recommendation. And they can get that from the town council records. I would hope that it would be made available to them upon request. I don't know that I could. Zendaya, is that a public record that could be made available by request to the applicants?
Yes, well, it is a draft until the chairman, yourself, and the other committee
Right.
sign off on it. Committee members sign off on it, but once it's finalized and signatures are on it, that has turned into a public document.
All right, so it becomes a public record before it goes to town council, and the time frame of that we'll find it. I mean, just like everything else, it has to be done in a timely manner because we want to make our presentation, or at least my indication is the presentation will be made to the town council the first week of December. So all of that should be available by the end of November for any of our applicants.
Good. That would be great for all of the applicants to hear the discussion. So thank you very much for that.
All right.
Thank you.
So is there any further discussion at this time about the 12 jewels of life and the recommendation of no funding at this time will stand on the second pass?
Yes.
Any further discussion on the Art League of Hilton Head that was fully funded in the first pass? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on. The Art Center of Coastal Carolina was fully funded in the first pass. Any further discussion? David Carmine's Memorial Fund, fully funded in the first pass. Any further discussion? And again, for members of staff, just, I'm sorry if we're moving on quickly on this. Go ahead. If we have no further discussion or otherwise, please place in the columns, if they're fully funded and we make no changes, place the same amounts in column 2 as we're in column 1, or past 2, however that's signified on your, okay. The next applicant was the Gullah Museum of Hilton Head, and we fully funded that to the extent that they Turk qualified. That was $123,250. Is that correct? I think that's belief that was correct. So move on from there. Harbor Town, 4th of July. Yes.
The Gullah Museum, I had 125.
Yeah, we fully funded at 125.
Okay, I had the
I just wanted
question.
to make sure.
Okay, all right. My notes, I probably passed on that. Okay, 125, I had my notes about the question on Turk funding. Okay, and I didn't change them. So that's fully funded at 125. Harbor Town, 4th of July was fully funded at 23,000. Okay, no further comments or questions. The Choral Society was partially funded at 25,000. Is that correct? In our first run.
That is correct.
Okay, their request was 50,000. Is there any reconsideration recommendations by any members of the committee? Yeah, Ms. Martin?
Yeah, my only reconsideration, since when we first addressed this one, it was the first one to set a precedence that, if we're going to fund 50%, let's be consistent across the board. We have not been consistent across the board. So at this point, I would suggest as a committee that we relook at that. Do we fully fund, or do we still feel strongly about the fact that, with the numbers and whatnot, and I don't know where I don't see Jim on the right now but the buckets are fully applied. So I just want to bring that up that way.
This is one, they have a long history on the island. I mean, I don't want to, downplay that. I think it's their 45th year. I've seen some advertisements actually for the Choral Society this year. So is it, Ms. Martin, are you asking to re-examine that at the sum of $50,000 at this time?
I am. Maybe we take a vote, into a poll to fully fund based on the fact that we have not applied the consistent blanket like we talked about earlier. So let's maybe put it to poll. And I'm with you, Chairman. They have a long existence on the island, but it's just the numbers didn't jive with us. And that's one of the reasons why we weren't fully funding them, with the expectation that they come back with better numbers next year.
And I get some of this, again, it's not their fault, some of it, because
I know.
their facility is allowing them only 50% capacity,
That's
right?
the other thing. Mhm.
And that's the problem generally with this island is basically performance space.
A lot of them are church venues. I know.
Right. And with that venue limiting, at least through the end of this year, through December, 50% capacity, including the participants and staff, which then even limits your general audience even more. I understand that. So anybody else have any additional comments? Because right now I have a request to poll on this one. Anybody else have any comments at this time? Okay, not seeing any. What the question being is, we have partial funding at 25,000, which we've approved, and we have a request to reconsider that for full funding at 50. So I'm now going to poll the members. And as I look at my screen, Ms. Johnson, you're first up. So what is your recommendation?
To maintain the reduced funding at 25.
Okay, we have partial funding. Ms. Martin, are you? Yes. Okay, Ms. Martin, you're.
I'm now inclined, based on what we talked about, reduction in attendance and all that was out of their control. I'm up to fully funding back to 50.
Okay. Mr. Berghausen.
I stay at 50 because the cost per tourist is very high, even going back 3 or 4 years. So
you're talking about 50% or partial funding?
Yeah, I stay at partial.
25.
Okay, Mr. Farrell.
I'm in favor of full funding, given the circumstances.
Okay, Mr. Thomas.
I'm in favor of full funding as well, given the discussion and the considerations.
Mr. Arnold.
I'm in agreement with full funding now that we've done the first pass. Full funding.
The chair had this initially on his notes at full funding. And so right now the vote would be 5-2 in favor of full funding. So I'm going to ask the staff to change in column 2, or to change in this pass, is now the funding recommendation is $50,000 for the Hilton Head Choral Society. Let's see, any further discussion on the Concours d'Elegance? We fully funded that in the first round. Seeing none, I will move on to the dance theater. We had a discussion on that. We polled in the first round, and we awarded a 50%. A 50% award of $9,500 in the first round. Does anybody have any further discussions or recommendations at this time?
First round.
I'm going to recognize Mr. Thomas first. Okay, Mr. Thomas.
Yeah, in the exact same context as the Choral Society, I would recommend full funding.
Okay, so we have a new recommendation of full funding.
Actually, it's not a new recommendation.
No, it's not a new recommendation. I know it's a re-recommend or whatever. Round 2, it's a recommendation to
No,
reconsider.
but round one was I thought 5-2 in full funding.
Yeah.
Correct.
Round 1 was full funding.
I think it was.
You
Yeah, we
had
had-
funding.
I had 4-3 on partial funding. Somebody.
A 4-3 in full funding.
Okay.
Yeah, it was important.
In the numbers that add up to the $3,288,535 is $19,000.
Okay, so I had, okay. All right. So we did fund it in round one. My notes are mistaken. I'm sorry about that. So we did make a full funding at 19 in the
Yeah.
first round. Okay. All right, then we are there. I'm sorry. Trying to keep the ship afloat and keep it, and I'm not keeping track of my notes. Okay. Hilton Head Island, we fully funded in the first round, so we will no further discussion on that one. The Land Trust, we fully funded in round one. The Rec Association, we fully funded in round one. St. Patrick's Day Parade, we fully funded to the extent of Turk qualifications at 41,235. Is that correct? Okay, I see nods. All right, so the next was the Hilton Head Island Wine and Food. We fully funded at 130,000. Okay. All right, all right. In round one, Hilton Head Chamber of Commerce, we fully funded at 480, but we've had a lot of discussion about other things since then, not necessarily about the award we made, or to some extent about the award we made, but is there anybody that wishes to reconsider the full award at 480 that we made in round one?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. Is it appropriate for us to change our recommendation based on another applicant's request?
You know, and I don't know that. So anybody, do we have town attorney or anybody on staff that can give us any guidance on that? Anybody wishes to try that?
I'm certainly not an attorney. Can I just kind of weigh in on just some comments?
Sure, Ms. Martin, go ahead.
I don't think that we can, change that, but I think we can make a recommendation based on our discussions earlier that we were all privy to, if we do go with that recommendation about the Low Country Golf Owners Association. And that we could add some commentary to substantiate why we're doing what we're doing.
Right. And I think those are the
Right, Mr.
two things that are linked with each other right now.
It's Zendaya.
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Martin is correct. You are able to award more based on your discussions. That just needs to be elaborated within I would suggest elaborating that within the recommendation letter. So there's no confusion as far as why the decision was made the way that it was made.
Okay, so, they presented a budget to us for a recommendation, their grant request of 480,000, which is lined out. If we were to grant an additional amount, i.e., for the in replacement of the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association, if we signified that as part of our recommendation, that would be sufficient to, in the town's vision, that would be sufficient to explain why we exceeded their grant, their request.
We could document that recommendation, yes, and we would.
Okay, thank you, John. Yes, Tom, Mr. Thomas.
Do we know why the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association was set up separately from the DMO in the first place? Do we know why that was done? I just remember Brad saying that it had always been that way. It had been set up that way, and that's why it was continuing.
And again, I'm not privy to that history, and I've never liked that explanation for anything. When I've come to something, my question's always been, you asked, a lot of people ask the question why, I asked the question why not, I asked both ends of that question. I don't know. I mean,
Am I allowed, having been recused, am I allowed to respond to that? Or
as long as you don't take, I think as long as you don't, and again,
Maybe not.
I think I don't.
my comments would be purely from an educational standpoint, not swaying a vote one way or the other. It would be historically why it was established.
My question is, historically, is there any knowledge as to why it was set up that way originally?
Yeah, and my real problem I have is you've recused yourself, and so I don't know that you have an opportunity to say that, John. I wish they would have made a better presentation. Maybe we didn't ask the right questions, and maybe it's our fault because of that. Maybe we do need to, look more at historical situation.
I think Brad was possibly challenged to the point that he mentioned that it had always been set up that way. I do
Yeah.
remember that comment.
Well,
Stephen
I-
might be able to shed some light.
I'm not so sure I heard him say it's always been that way. I heard
I
him
think
say
the
at one
reason-
point,
Yeah.
it was decided to do it this way. That's
Okay.
different from always.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty confident we're not the first committee to have discussions like this with respect to this award. So it's been out there debated for quite a while and perhaps has gone both ways in history.
John, if the chair is going to rule that I'm not going to allow you to make any historical comments because you're recusal on this, I just want to make sure that there's no question as to the ethics involved here on your behalf or anybody's behalf on this thing. And I appreciate you're wanting to do so, but I just can't see allowing you to do that at this point.
Good. That's understood.
Okay.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Arnold.
I can't speak for the history of why it was set up that way, but I have my assumptions that it was set up this way because the Low Country Golf Owners Association is better suited to market to the golf audience than the chamber may be as a profession and a tourism-driven entity. So I don't know that to be factual, but I would think that it was broken off as, okay, you guys are best suited to market alongside with the DMO at the same time, but specifically to the golf audience and to the specific markets.
Yes, Mr. Berghausen.
But what I'm hearing is that the Low Country Golf Association doesn't market to the golfers. They just turn the money over to the chamber and the chamber does the marketing. That's what I've heard.
I don't believe that's the case. I believe that like on their budget that you see of the $50,000 for PR, that's money that they spend themselves on PR. That's not money turned over to the chamber to do the PR. That's in addition to what the chamber does as well. So I do have a recommendation if it's the time and appropriate.
Yeah.
What I would like to see done with the chamber. If we can make a recommendation to increase their funding by 50,000. And again, this is where I don't know if it's appropriate to mention the other candidate at the same time, but I would like to make a recommendation to increase the chamber's allocation up to 530,000 to shave 50,000 off of the Low Country to try to change the tides of how this is done.
Okay, so we now have a recommendation. We had in round one full funding at 480, and in round two, we have a recommendation to increase that to 530,000 with explanation as to why, including that it's funding being derived from another applicant. It appears that that's the sole function of that applicant's application is to fund the work of the Chamber of Commerce. And so that was a pass-through type situation. And then the funding might better be sent directly to the Chamber of Commerce under that situation.
On their behalf, would it be on their behalf? Like if we go with this, and I have one other observation question, but if we go with this, it would be on their behalf that we would pass through those 50,000 to the chamber?
I think what our recommendation letter would basically say is the reason why that we recommended that above and beyond is because it appeared that the application of the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association was simply to fund some operation of the Chamber of Commerce, and that was the sole function of that grant.
So if we do that, we put then the stipulation that who would need to prove how those dollars are spent in terms of per tourist to get to Jim's bucket of his his formula. Who would prove that? The chamber or the Low Country Golf Association?
Well, the chamber has it in their budget. I mean, their budget actually says that in there for this additional grant included. Well, that's funny. Is their 480 included getting that money from the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association? If you look at their income for the supplemental
so let's
budget,
not have them double dip. What I'm saying, let's avoid double dipping.
Yeah.
But one observation question I had is in 2021, we granted them, they asked for 50, we granted them 50. what was that to produce the booklet or PR or what?
Well, here's the deal is they were also told to get us actual golfers on the course. And if you can see, we didn't get that information. That was a very big part of last year's presentation is,
So that's why I'm questioning their ask.
I mean, they still, at the time of their presentation in 2021 for this year, for the year we're now in, they were it's proprietary information we can't give you. I mean, there was a lot of stuff like that we were getting. And again, they're just a marketer. I mean, they're basically, these are the courses, you know, here's the tee times, these type of things, but they could not tell us with any certainty which ones are actually booked, who's on, you know, numbers on the course, where they came from, any of that information.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
are we discussing the chamber or are we discussing the?
Well,
local-
and that's, you know, we may be getting far afield. That's the question being is, you know, we have a recommendation to increase by 50 to account for the the contribution by the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association, which is theirs.
With
Mr.
the
Tom,
It would have explanation of why we're increasing 50,000. So my recommendation of 530, can we take a poll on that?
Yeah.
Mr. Thomas, go ahead first.
What I would possibly suggest is amending Steve's recommendation to include the restriction of the 50,000 additional that we're recommending for the chamber to the use in the production of the marketing materials for the Low Country Golf Owners Association. So that is a stipulated usage of the funds in the increase to the chamber.
I can get behind that.
Okay. All right. And so as presented, it appears without objection, and Chair will recognize without objection, that we now have a poll that we're going to make to potentially increase our award to the Chamber of Commerce with the stipulation $50,000 increase be specifically earmarked, designated, restricted, whatever terms, for use for the promotion that would have been funded by the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association for those purposes. Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do the poll then based on that. So the poll, I'm gonna leave it at this, how we're gonna present this. Question being, just tell me the figure you want to use when I give it 480 or 530. Okay, when I give you that, give me one of those two answers. Ms. Johnson.
480.
Okay. Ms. Martin.
530.
Mr. Berghausen.
530.
Mr. Farrell.
Am I eligible?
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw your face up on the screen. Well,
We're not talking about the Low Country. We're talking about
no,
the
I'm
chambers.
talking about the chamber. So yes, you are eligible.
530.
All right, thank you. Mr. Thomas,
530.
Mr. Arnold,
530?
and the chair also votes at 530. So we are going to revise in round two the award to the Chamber of Commerce to the sum of $530,000 with the stipulations that we've noted in our file that those are monies to be restricted, earmarked, or otherwise to be used for the contribution that the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association is going to make to the, and for the purposes that the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association is going to make to the Chamber of Commerce. Okay.
And Jim, I don't know if this would overstep our boundaries or authority in any way. Not that we have authority, but we overstep our boundaries in recommending that an advisory board of the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association work with the chamber for the use of those funds. I know that they currently have the structure for general marketing advice coming from constituents in the community, and I don't know why that couldn't be a recommended structure to them if we can go that far.
Listen, Dave, could you make sure that our recommendation letter echoes Mr. Thomas's comments. I think that's something we could ask for them to do.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have an objection to a recommendation of that nature before we move on? Okay. The next one on was the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra. We're still holding that in abeyance until we've resolved the other 33 applicants. So would you please, in round 2, show that 0 for the a placeholder for the symphony orchestra. The next applicant was the Lean Ensemble Theater that was fully funded in round 1. Oh, okay. Bye, Mr. Farrell. The next one coming up is the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association. We ended up in the first round. Did we budget that at 50?
I believe we put 0 on the first.
We put 0 on that. We did. Okay, I have that. I was looking at my scribble notes as to the vote, and then okay. So, do we have any changes to that based on the discussion we just had about the Chamber of Commerce? I'm not seeing anybody in the affirmative. So, does nobody wishes to supplement or change the recommendation? Okay. So
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? I do have a recommendation for the Low
Okay.
Country Association. I would recommend moving them to 50% of their original request, taking them to 50,000. I don't believe that cutting all of their funding serves a purpose. They do have a need to market themselves, as their budget states. They spend $50,000 on PR relations outside of what the chamber provides. So to split the difference between the two, I would make the recommendation to go along with the recommendation to the chamber of an additional 50,000. It's about 50,000 to the Low Country Golf Owners Association.
I agree
Okay.
with Mr. Arnold on that one too. I was going to bring that up.
Mr. Berghausen.
I didn't see in their budget that they're spending $50,000 outside on PR outside of the grant. I see the $50,000 of grant revenue listed, and I see the $50,000 outflow for reimbursable PR expense. So I can't say I agree with the comment that they're spending an additional 50.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well,
Mr. Arnold.
When I'm looking at their budget, if you have 50,000 for the PR, but then they have, I believe their total budget for marketing was 161,000. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So they do have a marketing effort that does need support from ATEX funding that would be eligible. Am I correct in that?
Zendaya, would that be correct? Any part of their marketing budget could be ATEX related?
Yes, that goes from printing to graphics to articles that are written and submitted for newsprint. That if it's a plethora of things. So
Okay.
it's not just they contact and do the chamber. They do a plethora of other things. In the past, they have gone to trade shows. They marketed there. They have gone to I know trade shows basically all over. I'm not sure with COVID how much of that has been done, or if it's maybe just online and such like that. But I know in the past that they have actually physically gone to trade shows and marketed to other golf ears that like the sport.
All right. So what we have in front, so that we know that their other marketing, at least the town considers, the staff considers that their other marketing budget could be considered for ATEX funding. And so we have a proposal on the board to modify our prior recommendation of 0. So I'm going to take a poll of our members at this time to see, and I'll just ask you to respond to either 0 or 50, or 0 or 50, which means funding at 50 or funding it, but we've already recommended 0. So Ms. Johnson, what is your recommendation?
Funding at 50.
Ms. Martin,
Funding at 50.
Mr. Berghausen,
I guess I'm swayed, funding at 50.
let's see, Mr. Thomas,
50.
Mr. Arnold.
50.
All right, the chair originally had this at 50, so we're going to modify in round 2 the funding to the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association at $50,000. In round 1, we fully funded the Long Cove Club at 30. In our first round, we fully funded Low Country Gola at 75. We're going through the no-brainers. We funded in the first round Mitchellville Preservation Project at 185. And we funded the NIBCAA at 205, fully funded in first round. We did not fund, or wait a second, no, we did not fund the Low Country the Low Country Tourism Commission. Is there a reconsideration of not funding them? Anybody have a modified recommendation? I'm not seeing anyone, so we will not modify that recommendation. So in round 2, the amount of 0 should be placed in that column. In round 1, we fully funded the Sea Pines Forest Preserve at 35,000. In round 1, we fully funded the Hilton Head Sea Turtle Patrol at 47,900. In round 1, we fully funded the Shelter Cove Harbor Company at 150,000. In round 1, we partially funded TEDx Hilton Head in the amount of 16,000. Is there any recommendation to change or otherwise? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so Chair not seeing any requests to change the recommendation. In round 2, we will place the sum of $16,000 in the TEDx Hilton Head column. In round 1, we fully funded the Boys and Girls Clubs of Hilton Head Island in the amount of $30,000. In round 1, we fully funded the Coastal Discovery Museum in the sum of $325,000. In round 1, we fully funded the first tee of the Low Country in the amount of $40,000. Okay, in the first round, we funded the Heritage Library. Did we fully fund the Heritage Library at 120 in the first round? That's what I thought. Yeah, I still had my notes regarding Turk funding, and then that was okay. And I have it circled that we did 120. Okay. We fully funded, according to Turk qualifications in first round, the Outside Foundation at 34.4. Is that correct? Once again, nod. Yes. Okay. We fully funded the Sandbox at 44.4 in the first round. And we partially funded the World Affairs Council of Hilton Head in the amount of $5,000 in the first round. Is there any change to that recommendation? Anybody have any further thoughts on that? I'm not seeing anything in the affirmative, so the chair will ask that the sum of $5,000 be placed in that column. So we have now gone through round 2. I'm going to ask staff to pull up the columns that we've done. And those of you who are keeping score at home, you can let them know if they're correct.
Mr. Borghausen.
I know what number I'm expecting.
Okay. The great state of South Carolina declares. What do we? Here we go.
That's good.
3, 4. It's up to 3,463,535.
$53,413,535.
Uh-oh, we're
I'm off.
we're-
50,000 somewhere.
You-
Did
you-
we do 270 for the,
Ah,
No.
yep, yep.
Do you have the Low Country Golf Association in there for 50, and you have the chamber for 530?
Let's do that. You need to put a positive 50 on that, or is that's just ink on there? I don't understand.
yes,
Okay.
it's just to
It's just-
say,
just-
to
yeah.
signify that the number changed. Did we
Okay.
do 270 for the,
Yeah, that makes sense.
did we add a number?
No, we
for-
haven't been to the symphony. We haven't touched yet. So it's
No,
still
we haven't touched. That's 0. So 3413535. Jim, you've got 3463535.
So, yeah, I do, but it could very well be me, but I don't.
okay. Let's
see
go through them line by line. Then let's make sure we're at. So 12 Jewels 0, Art League 95,
it. Yeah,
Art Center 405,
yes,
Carmine's Memorial Fund 19.6,
right,
Gullah Museum 125,
right,
Harbor Town Merchants 23.
yes,
The Choral Society went to 50. Is that correct? We changed that to
Correct.
50? Okay. 307 to the Concours d'Elegance, 19 to the Dance Theater, Airport 160,
mm-hmm,
Land Trust 41,
mm-hmm,
Rec Center 35,
right,
Parade 41,235. The Chamber, then we went up to 530.
and the wine and food at
Oh.
130.
Where'd the wine festival go? Oh, 130 on the wine festival. Yeah. I got to get better eyes or a bigger screen. Okay. Then 530 to the chamber. Thank you. Then we had Symphony at 0 for this round. The Lean Ensemble at 40. Then we reduced the Low Country Golf Course Owners Association from 0. We went from 0 to 50. We actually increased that by 50.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay. Long Clove Club at 30. You scroll and 75 for the Low Country Gullah.
oh, I see my error.
Okay.
So I agree with your number. I had this South Carolina Low Country and Resort item I added, trying to insert the 50 back for Low Country Golf.
Okay.
I put it on the wrong line.
Let's roll down to the bottom then. So your figure would be, so I can see the total figure now. So your figure, Jim, is
3,435. Yeah,
530. Okay, then we're in agreement. So that's the figure at the end of the second pass.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. Chairman, I thought I heard you say for Boys and Girls Club, 35,000. And that's what it says on the spreadsheet, but on the application, it's 30,000.
I say Boys and Girls Club should be 30,000. If I said 35, I'm mistaken.
It is
It's
30, it is 30,000.
Okay.
Yeah, it says, okay. So the figure we've come up with was for the 33 grants that we've considered at this point, a total of $3.413 million and then another 535 on top of that. So I'm going to ask the members at this point, is there any need for any additional consideration of the applicants, the 33 applicants we've discussed so far? If there's not, then I would, if we want to discuss them further, we can. I want a full and fair consideration of the 33 applicants we've had in front of us this morning and this afternoon now. But if there is no further discussion or we don't anticipate changing anything further, we can dispense with going through a third pass at this time. So I'm just asking, as I look out at the members, is there anybody that has any objection to voting on the 33 applications that we've taken up thus far?
I have no objections.
I have no
Okay,
objection.
okay, what I'm going to ask for, and again, when we get to the anybody who has filed a recusal, it will be duly noted in the record. I want the record to reflect that I know that Mr. Farrell has recused from certain applications. When we vote on these en masse, the record will show that Mr. Farrell did not vote on any that he recused himself from, or any of the other, who else recused themselves from any, Mr. Thomas. The record will show that you're recused and do not vote and abstain from the votes from the organizations from which you have recused yourselves. So if the chair at this time would entertain a motion to take up the 33 applications that we've had thus far today.
So moved.
Okay, Ms. Johnson has moved
I second.
and Ms. Martin has seconded. So would Zendaya, would you please call the roll as to the 33 applicants that we've considered in our first session today?
Yes, sir. Ms. Johnson,
Approved.
Ms. Martin,
Approved.
Mr. Farrell,
Approved.
Mr. Berghausen,
Approve.
Mr. Thomas,
Approved.
Mr. Arnold,
Approved.
Mr. Fluker.
Approved. Okay. Let's take one more look at this, so we on the record of the ones that we've considered today. So we have approved applications Jim, why don't you go ahead and give me the figure on how much we've approved thus far?
We have approved $3,413,535.
Okay,
That was on the second pass.
okay. So the assumption is that we have significant funds available for additional applicants. Is that correct, Zendaya?
That is correct.
The chair would entertain a motion at this time if to take up the untimely filed application of the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra, if anybody is so inclined.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we bring up and discuss the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra for their application of $270,000 for this grant.
Okay. Do we have any, do we have a second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion which is seconded to consider the application of the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra. At this time, Zendaya, would you please call the roll as to moving forward that motion?
Certainly. Ms. Johnson,
Approved.
Ms. Martin,
Approve.
Mr. Farrell,
Approved.
Mr. Berghausen,
Approve.
Mr. Thomas,
Approved.
Mr. Arnold,
Approved.
and Mr. Fluker.
Approved. All right, now we're taking up the 34th applicant in today's consideration. This is the untimely filed application of the Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra. And the chair would just like to note that, again, in fairness to the other applicants, that's the reason why we held this application back. It was not timely filed. In fact, it wasn't filed for almost 2 weeks after our deadline. But because we have funding available and because they do provide arts to the island, which are a consideration for tourism and otherwise, the chair recognized that it would be fair to consider them at some point as either an untimely filed application or be considered kind of as a out of cycle applicant. And so at this time, we're going to consider that application as filed. Do we have any recommendations from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, would you clarify approval as an out-of-cycle request as
Well-
opposed to late applicant?
We're in a gray area this time. It's kind of like in the 4 years I've been on this board, we've never, as far as I know, because I've only been chairman for 2 cycles, we've never had a late filing. I don't know the history of that. Zendaya, can you give us any indication? Has there ever been a prior late filings?
So in the past, we have had a few over the years that we have accepted after the deadline due to technical errors or things like that, but not one that has been this long of a gap from the end date to the, from the closing of the application to when they did file.
And so initially, when I heard that they filed late, my feeling was, okay, they filed late. We're not going to take up their application. As chairman, that was what I told staff. Their application was accepted, and I'm not asking who said we would accept the application. Again, I'm not getting into the political morass, which is everywhere. So I'm just saying is the application was accepted on behalf of the town, and therefore it's something that we have to consider. We have to address, we'll use that term more than anything else. They acknowledged that they didn't attempt to file it on time. We heard the mea culpa during their presentation. I don't find that to be an excuse, but again, I'm one member of the committee, and my vote is one on there. That's it. I voted to consider their application. It doesn't mean that I did that too, so we would have discussion. That doesn't say what my vote will be in the long run. But so I open it up at this time. We're treading on new ground to some extent. Technical issues, we've heard about those in the past. You try to file it and you get a 404 code, or you get something that does not allow it to get in this electronic age. But there were attempts at least to file a timely application on behalf of others. And then what they did is, you call it an amended application when it comes in after the fact, because there was an application, an attempt to file the application on time, it was rejected or didn't get through for whatever reasons. So this is where we're at now. So does any member of the committee have any recommendation, any further questions, any other comments at this time? Ms. Martin.
Comment and recommendation. It was my understanding when I listened to their presentation, I think it was Mr. Jordan, if I'm not mistaken, but anyway, he seemed to indicate that somebody had dropped the ball, that somebody had dropped the ball and they were going to address that. So that was one thing. Comment in general, the symphony orchestra is a huge organization on this island. I think it brings a high level of tourism. And I think as a committee, we should seriously consider their request. In addition to that, they've made fund requests in the past. I mean, year over year, I believe, at least I'm looking at, they have the same requests as they did in 2021. So I don't see why, as a committee, and I'll put it, I'll ask the rest of it, my committee members, how they feel, but I think this is a valid, valuable organization on this island that brings good tourism dollars, and I think we ought to look at their application and see about funding them.
Are you making a recommendation as to fund? Did you just recommend full funding?
Right now, I'm not recommending full funding per se. I'm just recommending that we look at their request and move forward with their request, and then we can look at a poll if we decide we don't want to fully.
I think that's the question we've already decided. Yeah. We're going to.
Well, then I would fully fund.
Okay. All right. So any other recommendations, or go ahead, Jim.
I would concur with full funding. I think that the Symphony Orchestra is a really important organization here on the island. It is one of many things that distinguish us from the Seabrook Islands and the Kiowa Islands. I mean, this is a kind of a coup for us to have a Hilton Head Symphony Orchestra, I think. The cost is high, but symphony orchestras are expensive. But it's clearly not the highest of those we've awarded money to. So it's not out of bounds. It's just on the high side. And then they're doing all the right things in terms of efforts at Soundways, efforts at the new Celebration Park. They're really reaching out to try to connect with tourists. So I applaud their efforts. It's not quite where we'd like to see it in terms of efficiency, but it's moving in the right direction, and I would fully fund them.
Any other discussion at this time? Yes, Mr. Arnold.
Chairman, if this applicant had been on time, I would have supported a full recommendation. I believe we have done what we said we would do, which is not consider this applicant until we had considered all the others and we had made our decision on that, which we've done. There does appear to be sufficient funding that we could recommend a full funding there. That would be my recommendation still, that we do fully fund. I think they know they have made a mistake, and we probably won't see that again. So my recommendation is full funding, but let it be documented that if for some reason the funding is not there, that their request would be shaven off before any of the others that have been approved. We would approve the 3,413,535. If we not eligible or able to fund the 270 because we were 20,000 short, then they would go down to 250. They would be the first one with the reduction if for some reason we don't hit the number that we anticipate to be able to fully fund. So as it stands, I recommend full funding.
Okay, and if I understand you right, it's full funding subject to ATAX funding available after the other 33 applicants, correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
I agree with that too, actually.
Okay, anybody else have any further discussions on the, yes, Mr. Thomas?
Just full funding. Jim Berghausen addressed my concern, and that was the high end of the efficiency scale. But again, it's one of those organizations that gives us a competitive advantage as a destination.
Any other discussion? Do we need to poll at this time or?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was concerned that there were going to be no consequences, and not that they needed to be harsh, but I think Mr. Arnold's recommendation, because we don't want to have this continue. They are very valuable, and I think Mr. Arnold's recommendation is very logical, and I think it will be the impetus to deter it from happening in the future.
Okay. The way I understand, and again, we only have the one question in front of us right now, is to fully fund the symphony orchestra at a sum of $270,000 per request, subject to the availability of ATAX funding after the funding of the other 33 organizations, correct? Okay. So since I'm getting affirmation from everybody, we'll go ahead and call a roll on this particular vote, a standalone vote. So, and that being the question, 270, full funding at 270, subject to ATAX funding. So, Sunday, would you call the roll, please?
Ms. Johnson,
270, subject to ATAX availability.
Okay.
Ms. Johnson, or Ms. Martin?
I approve that.
All right, Mr. Farrell.
Yes, as approved.
Okay, Mr. Berghausen.
In favor.
All right, Mr. Thomas.
In favor.
Mr. Arnold.
In favor?
All right, and Mr. Fluker.
I will abstain, and the reason abstention has nothing to do with their worth or otherwise. It's just because of the situation they put us in. So I'm going to abstain from voting yay or nay. Can we run now that we've done that? Let's run the totals, because we need to have some idea about what to do.
Should add 270.
So if I am adding them at full funding, we are at.
Can we put an asterisk, or is that why it's highlighted in yellow?
Yes, that's why I was highlighting in yellow, yes.
Yeah. in our recommendation letter, we will put in the subject to full, the available ATAX funding. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'll see the draft, so I'll make sure it gets in there. Okay, so the total, 3,683,535.
Correct.
Good. I was going to verify that with you. All right. So we do not know what the total funding available will be, but we've been given some indication that it will be above that figure of $3.6 million. So there will be surplus, we hope. There will be surplus funds available. And if that be the case, at this point, I would ask the committee for a recommendation as to what to do. Last year, we made a recommendation, the last full year we did this, not the out of cycle grants, but to split that between the chamber and the city with them to use it for projects that were approved. That was rejected by the city. And that's where we got it put it into available funds for out of cycle grants and otherwise to be used in the ATAX funding, either future ATAX funding or out of cycle grants. So the chair would entertain a motion at this time, if a member so sees it, to any funds received by the city in excess of the amounts that we have recommended that they be placed into availability by the ATAX committee to consider out of cycle grants in the future year. Does anybody have a recommendation or a motion to that extent?
I motion we move forward with that.
Yes.
All right, I see Ms. Johnson made the motion. Ms.
Second.
Martin made the motion. Ms. Johnson is seconding the motion.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and have a roll on that. Cindy, will you call the roll?
Ms. Johnson,
Approve.
Ms. Martin,
Approve.
Mr. Farrell,
Approve.
Mr. Berghausen, Mr. Berghausen,
Wait a minute, approve. I'm sorry.
thank you, Mr. Berghausen, Mr. Thomas,
Approved.
Mr. Arnold,
Approved.
and Mr. Fluker.
Approved. And does that conclude the new business, section 8? Do we have anything further to do in the new business section of the meeting?
That would be all, Mr. Fluker, Mr. Chairman. I will just note that for the record, on the third pass, the final number is 3 million to be approved for the 2022 accommodations tax grants is $3,683,535.
Yes, and so before wrapping up the new business of the day, before we have the final closing, as chairman, I want to thank members of my committee. Done great job. You're talented people. And despite what one individual says about you, I consider you all to be honorable people. And I've worked with lots of people in my profession over the years, and you have done, a yeoman's job to be fair. You know what we're doing. You study the applications. You make my life in my job so much easier as chairman because you're so prepared to move forward with things. And so I appreciate all the work you've done. I also want to thank staff. We know Zendaya is there all the time for us. And so Zendaya Irvin, I thank her for her assistance and in the committee and all the other members of the finance committee, including our finance area of the town, including John Troyer and everybody else that are unseen. You're all heroes because you help us look good by giving us the facts, figures, and qualifications that we wouldn't normally have otherwise. And not last but not least, I want to thank all the applicants because these applications are getting so much easier to deal with and we're getting so much better information on these. And as we adapt to get more and better information, as we learn what we need to do this job, and they're willing to adapt and get us that information. And we've seen that in some of the follow-up apps. So I congratulate all of them. They make our job easier. And again, we make a recommendation. Despite what others think, we do, all we're doing is people come to us that qualify under the law as non-for-profit organizations, 501c3 or other, those type of work, to promote the island through events, through marketing and otherwise. And we take the funds that are made available through state law to do that. And I think we do it very well. We do it without pay. For those of you that have jobs outside of this, are still working, so to speak, you're taking time off to do this. And it takes time to review all these applications. You spent at least 12 hours, if not more, sitting through these meetings. Otherwise, those who sat live and those who had to listen to it on the iPod or
It's all
otherwise.
good. It's all
Yeah,
good.
it's so good. And without your hard work, this would be, and without the hard work of the applicants who may put together good grant writers are always good to have. And and we've seen that in some of the applications that have turned around in a year or less and given us so much more information and so much better applications. So I thank all of you, and I look forward in the future to being able to get together with you live again, and hopefully next spring, if we have grant applications, we'll take them up then. If not, we'll be getting back together in the spring for the presentation by the chamber of their budget for the DMO for next year, which we have to approve. But again, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for your leadership, Jim.
Thank you, Jim, for your leadership.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, I'd like to echo what you've said there. A big thank you to the staff. They put us in a great position to get us the documents we need, as well as to the applicants. I myself have written grant requests before, and it's not a fun process. They continue to get better here, make our jobs a lot easier too, and quickly get us all the documents we need if it's not provided the first time around. A big thank you to the fellow committee members for your time. It truly is a pleasure to serve with you guys. I know you have big hearts and care about this island just as much as I do. So I'm excited about 2022 and all the events that are going to be supported by the ATAX funding. Look forward to our recommendation to the town. Hopefully that these fundings will be awarded, and 2022 on the island of Hilton Head is going to be a fantastic one. I truly believe it. So thank you.
Ms. Johnson, do you have a comment?
Yes, I'd like to say thank you to the committee members and staff who've taken my many, many, many questions. As a freshman member of the committee, I truly appreciate the support and just feel honored to be a part of the process. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. We all started there at one point ourselves. So, and we all bumbled around and did things until we figured out what we were supposed to do. You did it much quicker than some of us did. So thank you. All right, if there being no further business to come before this committee, I am adjourning the meeting. It is 12:34 p.m. Thank you all.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Deal.
Thank you, everyone.